Good morning. It is 6:06 on Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. Well, we've got a 50% chance of rain today. The skies are overcast. It's 53 degrees. Welcome to, Marrone in the Morning on Radio Westchester and RadioWestchester.com. We are the station at the new Rochelle train station. You can listen to us right here on RadioWestchester.com. You can watch or listen on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Periscope, if you've got it, where probably broadcasting on it. Welcome to the program. Once again, our top story this morning, the new Rochelle Development Commissioner was charged yesterday in the Trump Plaza altercation, and everybody's lawyering up. The altercation indeed has prompted a restraining order against the Development Commissioner. An earthquake hit Marrone yesterday. I know not many of you heard about it, but, well, very few of you heard it, but some people did. We'll tell you about that. And we had yet another bomb scare yesterday at the new Rochelle train station. And if you didn't see it, the Nationals won last night, forcing a second game in the World Series. This is Radio Westchester. All right, let's get to the local news. Welcome once again. It is 56 and overcast. We'll have more wetness today. Not heavy rain, but drizzle off and on. Once again, hang in there. Let's get to those stories. This out of LOHUD and News 12 yesterday. New Rochelle's Development Commissioner and architect behind the unprecedented redevelopment of the downtown was charged yesterday in connection with a physical altercation with a worker at Trump Plaza. Luis Aragon was charged with second-degree harassment and is scheduled to be arraigned in city court. Actually, he was yesterday afternoon. Aragon, who lives in the Trump building in New Rochelle, was caught on a building's camera shortly after 6 a.m. on Friday, yelling at a security guard who was delivering newspapers. Aragon claimed he was called a homophobic slur during a verbal dispute before grabbing the cart of newspapers from the guard, tossing it into the hallway, and then grabbing the guard by the back of the shirt and pushing him into the hallway. Here's a quote here from the commissioner. He says, "I'm very sorry for what I did. I know better than to get physical. I was jet-lagged and tired and lost my cool." The attorney for the security guard, Richard St. Paul, said his client never used a homophobic slur. And we will see where this goes. It looks like everybody's headed to court. Now, one of the things that resulted is this story out of News 12 yesterday. A judge issued a temporary restraining order against the Development Commissioner of New Rochelle. Luis Aragon pleaded not guilty to a second-degree harassment in the arraignment in the afternoon. He didn't have anything to say to News 12, who gave us this part of the story as he left New Rochelle City Court. And the judge signed the order but carved out an exception, basically asking Aragon to avoid the security guard and walk the other way if he sees him. Richard St. Paul, again, a fixture at one point here in New Rochelle. He ran for mayor several years ago, now representing the alleged victim in this case, says, quote, "What Aragon did here was inexcusable. He physically assaulted my client. There was no way that charge should be harassment." St. Paul says he would like to see Aragon fired from his New Rochelle post. I thought they were attorneys. I didn't know they were supposed to make up the law. We'll have more to say about that coming up. Well, you might have heard a boom, or you might have felt a little bit of shaking yesterday. Less than a week after the Lower Hudson Valley felt its first earthquake in 2019, a second tremor shook the area. At 8:01 Monday, a 1.27 magnitude earthquake was recorded in Marrone, according to the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in Palisades. They give these names to things. It was located near the corner of Rockland Avenue and Hickory Grove, just west of Interstate 95. We tell you these things because there is interest in it, but there was no one in any danger. Well, the Houston Astros are in danger they didn't plan for. Steven Strasburg provided the guts and the Nationals' muscle to extend the World Series to Game 7 last night, thanks to Strasburg's 8 1/3 solid innings and home runs by Adam Eaton, Juan Soto, and Anthony Rendon. The Nationals hung a 7-2 loss on the Astros last night in Game 6 that was witnessed by a sold-out Minute Maid crowd. Well, gee, you would think it would be sold out. It's only the World Series. Tied at 3-3, the series will be decided when the Nationals' right-hander Max Scherzer, scratched from his scheduled start in Game 5, is expected to oppose Astros righty Zach Greinke. That is tonight at 8:08. How would you like to have some advertising going on that game? Let's get back to the local news. These next two items are about jobs that are available. In fact, we're pretty proud of this. Yesterday, we had on we had on the Vice President of Human Resources for UPS. And don't you know, this story out today, separate, but we like to make it about us when we can. UPS is set to open a new Yonkers facility in the next few months, bringing more than 150 jobs as the holiday and shipping season nears. The company noted in a statement yesterday, and this was reported in Aloha Today, the opening of the package operation at 555 Tuckahoe Road in the next 2 to 3 weeks will create both full and part-time positions in the area, including package handlers and drivers. UPS is already hiring seasonal employees, including more than 11,000 jobs in New York and New Jersey. Wages range, as we told you yesterday, from $14 to $30 an hour. Now, speaking of civil service, full-time jobs, good jobs. This story out of Yonkers. Mayor Mike Spano, along with the Fire Commissioner Robert Sweeney and members of the fire department in Yonkers, will be on hand at the Yonkers, or were on hand at the Yonkers Fire Department. And let's see now. Oh, we messed this story up. But at any rate, firefighter applications will be accepted until January 10 at the Fire Recruitment Office at the Yonkers Civil Service Office. That's the point. 1 Larkin Center. We did this story out of time. There was a meeting yesterday at 2:30. Firefighter applications, though, are available. They will be accepted until January 10 at the Fire Recruitment Office at the Yonkers Civil Service Office, located at 1 Larkin Center on the second floor. The fire examination will take place on Saturday, April 25th. One more time. Jobs, Yonkers, firemen, women, firefighters. You can go to the office at 1 Larkin Center. Pick up an application. You've got through January 10. The fire examination will take place Saturday, April 25th. The starting salary, $71,605. Candidates must be at least 17 years and 6 months old and have not reached their 29th birthday on the day of the written exam. That means I'm 30 years too old to apply for. You see these things when you get older, folks. Good morning once again. It is 56 degrees in Westchester. It's wet again. 50% chance of rain today. We'll be back with the weather in its entirety in just a few minutes, though. Let us finish up the news as we pass through 6:15. A Portchester man is accused of sexually abusing a child several times in the first half of 2016. A little comment about the news. All this abuse of children and women and some men. One of the problems with good news coverage and social media is that, did we realize that there was so much of this? Obviously, it's a part of humanity, but it's a part of humanity that needs to be addressed. All right, I'll go forward with the news. This is the nice thing about doing it in this format. You can poke a little comment in there and share what you're thinking. And I like that. A man by the name of Furman James, 46, was arrested by Portchester police on Tuesday and charged with second-degree course of sexual conduct against a child. It's a felony. He had several acts of sexual contact on multiple occasions. The girl was 13, or the child. We don't know if it was a girl. 13 years old. Bail was set at $20,000, and he's scheduled to return to Village Court for a felony hearing on November 4. Hey, New York City, are you listening? Would this guy have walked? No bail, first day? Yeah, we're going to keep throwing you under the bus with some of the things you're doing down in New York City. All right, because the Bronx is right next door. By the way, I had a meeting in the Bronx yesterday. We'll be talking about that in a little while. Boy, oh boy. It makes White Plains look like heaven in terms of parking and figuring out where your car is. We'll get right back to that. All right, Briar Cliff Manor, this story. And folks, they know what they're talking about. If you've ever driven up on Route 9A. This story will resonate. Please listen in. Residents, village and county officials, and others today called for, that was yesterday, for state transportation officials to produce a comprehensive study of the Route 9A corridor and demanded action to resolve its safety problems. Almost all of us know someone who was in an accident on 9A, don't we? This out of LOHUD today. At a news conference, officials said the stretch that passes through Briarcliff Manor and Ossining is outdated, dangerous, and deadly. In 2018, get this number, 1 year, there were 120 crashes on that stretch of Route 9A. We're going to see if we can get Mayor Stephen Vescio on the phone on this broadcast. Probably won't do it today. We're going to get him on the broadcast. See, we're holding it up separate. We will get them on, and we will help bang that drum, and not slowly. It is 6:18. This out of New Jersey yesterday, but it's made a fuss in the region. Officials say that the pilot of a small plane that crashed into Middlesex County in a house there and then exploded did not survive the crash. This out of News 12 today, and we got this from their partners, News 12 in New Jersey. Woodbridge Township spokesperson John Haggerty said the pilot of the Cessna 414, that's a nice plane, that smashed into a home in the Colonia section was confirmed to be dead. The pilot was identified as one Dr. Michael Schloss, an experienced pilot from Virginia. The crash happened around 11 a.m. yesterday. Well, we've got some rankings and things of nursing homes that we want to share with you in a little while, and also chit-chat about some of the other stories of the day. But first, it's time for today's weather. And if I can only find that copy, we'd be good. Do you know, speaking of copy, do you know why I don't have a good easel in here? I told you the story the other day. We're not going to mention where and who and how. But I went into a Staples a couple of days ago, and this is a part of my commitment to throw businesses under the bus that don't treat people well. There was 1.5 people in the store with about 30 customers, and their answer was, well, nobody showed up to work today. I'm still not ready to defend the millennials' work ethic. They're going to have to show me a lot more. It was all young people decided to call in. You know, businesses have had their way for a long time. I get that. And then unions went too far. But whatever happened to the work ethic that when someone's paying you and depending on you, you got to show up? So I went in. They couldn't find the easels. There were none on the, I waited for 35 minutes. There were none on the shelves. So I got a little easel. It works all right. But, we need these things in radio. So I'm going to go to another store. Anyway, we have to go to the weather. I'm just in that kind of mood today. Don't get upset with me. It is 56. It's overcast. And we have periods of drizzle. The temperature will be 68 degrees. And the full weather is brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And so today, periods of drizzle. The temperature will get up to about 98, though. I don't know whether to wear a sweater or not. This weather's crazy. The wind will be light. Now, tonight, increasing clouds with rain late at night. The temperature will be 60 degrees. The wind will be light once again. Tomorrow, more rain. Cloudy with periods of rain. The temperature getting up to 71. The wind out of the south, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Friday, mostly sunny skies. The high will be 56 degrees. The overnight low will be 36 degrees. Saturday, I know you're interested in the weekend, so we'll talk about the weekend. Sunshine through high, thin clouds. The high will be 52 degrees. Welcome once again. If you're just joining us, it is Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. Tomorrow is Halloween, and should I wear something tomorrow, or is this face I modeled for Halloween decorations this year. So, you know what I did find out today, though, that today is National Candy Corn Day. Who thinks of this stuff? These businesses, they make it tough. Now, don't get me started, because every time I go on this riff, not that you did this, you're not talking to us yet, but you're listening. Every time I go on this riff, I think of the holidays that drive me out of my mind. And I get in trouble, but I'm going to get in trouble again. Now, Halloween I kind of love because I've never really grown up. Not that I took a treat. I love Christmas. I'm indifferent to, but understand the religiosity of Easter. But a lot of the holidays are just made up by businesses. And I know business is important, but my favorite. Now, don't get upset. Please, ladies, relatives, friends, other halves. One of the most contrived holidays on the planet comes up in February, and you know which one it is. We got to go out and buy chocolates and hearts and flowers and all that stuff. Valentine's Day is for the card companies. Easter is for the card companies. I mean, what did the resurrection ever have to do with chocolate? Likewise, today is Candy Corn Day, so you'll go out and buy everybody likes them, but giant bags of sugar, and more people will die young. But what do I care? I'm not as in a grumpy mood as it seems. Let's talk about who's coming on the program this morning. We'll be opening up the phones in a little while after I give you reason to be annoyed and to call us. But as you know, it is early voting. In fact, before the mayor stopped in to the studio, and a number of elected officials will be out on the platform today. We had a little trouble getting the window open because they painted the other day and the windows are stuck. But we'll bring them in here if we can't get out there to see them. But it is early voting week. Now, today is Wednesday, October 30th. You still have a few days to vote early. Forget Election Day next week. You can get it all out of the way now. Today, here in New Rochelle at City Hall, and right next door in Mount Vernon at their City Hall. But we'll stick with New Rochelle since we'll have some of their people coming in today. It's October 30th, Wednesday, 8 to 4 p.m. You can go over to City Hall, but it's the back door, 9 Buford Place. 9 Buford Place. It sounds like it belongs in Alabama. Buford, Alabama. Where is it? October 30th, 8 to 4 p.m. Tomorrow on Halloween, a good day to vote for a ghoul or a goblin. It's at noon time when it opens, noon to 8, Friday, 8 to 4. It's like every other day. Saturday, noon to 5. That's November 2nd, noon to 5. And Sunday, November 3rd, 12 to 5. Monday, nobody's voting for anything. And then come Election Day, of course, the polls will be open 6 a.m. to 9, and you would go to your usual voting place. Today's program is courtesy of United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and their associates, Aging Issues Radio. The law firm of Pena and Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. It is 6:25. Did anybody try to call me yet? I should put on a little sound so I could hear it when they call. So you might hear pardon me, and that means that someone's on the telephone. All right, let's look at the lineup today. And boy, do I really need this easel. Coming in to see us this morning about 6:50, about 20 minutes from now, and then on into the 7 o'clock hour, Sarah Langlois. She's the Republican running in District 5 here in New Rochelle. We hope to have Ms. Kay on tomorrow, the woman she's running against. We need to fortify that, if you will. Professor Jeannie Zaino joins us at 7:35 today. We have much to talk about. We haven't been able to get her on for the last couple of weeks. She's been busy, probably doing television, but that's her first responsibility, the way it works. 8 o'clock, Mondaire Jones. Do you know what that name is? Do you know who he is? Well, he's the man. It depends on who you talk to. He's the man that kind of, this is heresy if you're a Democrat, but I'm going to go there. This is the one that chased Anita Lowy out of politics. Now, she's 80, I get it, 81 or 82. She wants to retire. That's probably true, but it sounds sexier to say that she got a challenge from the left and cast her chips and said, I'm out of here. And the person that did that, Mondaire Jones, he was the first challenger to say he would primary the Congresswoman. So we will have him on at 8 o'clock today. Al Tarantino joins us at 8:35. Ivar Hayden at 8:50. And I'm told he'll be out here today. At least Ivar will. We'll drag him in if we have to. And, of course, at 9 o'clock, our long-form interview. Harlan Ullman, we have much to talk about. If you think you can't figure out Syria, maybe he can. I don't know. Now, today is the 30th. Tomorrow's the 31st. On Friday, okay, and somehow I did not do that story, and I will catch up with it in just a few minutes. As you know, yesterday we had an arrest of the individual who was accused of having some sort of sexual contact here in New Rochelle with a 15-year-old. He spent some time in Valhalla jail, and we got the report early today from Talk of the Sound, and also it was on News 12 in Lohud. And he is out now and will face charges. But on the first, and the reason we mentioned that story is that story, along with all of the other baggage that has taken place in the New Rochelle school system in the last 2 years, will be inherited by the new superintendent. And she, of course, Dr. Laura Fayho. Now, a story in Lohud this week kind of captured it. Over 30 years in the New York City school system, they wrote, and this Lohud, Gary Stern from Lohud. Laura Fayho rose from the classroom teacher to principal in Queens to district superintendent in Brooklyn to a series of increasingly powerful positions in the Department of Education, sprawling in the department's central administration in downtown Manhattan. From 2014 to 2018, she oversaw all 36 of the city's district superintendents, while maintaining authority over hiring and awarding tenure to the city's principal. And yet, he wrote, Fayho's rarefied credentials have been overshadowed in New Rochelle, where she is to become the school superintendent on Friday. Intense criticism of her hiring, which began on the day Fayho was introduced in June, has instead focused on her participation in a $90 million, quote, reverse discrimination, unquote, lawsuit against New Rochelle City schools. And here's the thing, and all of these stories resonate. First of all, this story, this story, of course, the principal, and these things happen in schools. They happen in every walk of life in terms of child abuse, pedophilia, et cetera, inappropriate sex. Unfortunately, it's a part of life. So she inherits that. In many ways, that will be the least of her problems. Having a school just coming out of an earthquake of changes, most notably after a murder about now 2 years ago, the resignation under pressure of the superintendent, the resignation under pressure of the principal of the high school, and on and on and on, and all the problems attendant to that, the problems on the Board of Education, et cetera. She inherits all of that. Now, there are many schools of thought, and we interviewed here for a solid hour, and we said we'd call her after she got the job, and now that she does, we'll have her on sometime next week, right after the election, after we do all of that. But this and the issues going on with the, and I guess it's always been thus, but going on with the development commissioner right now. Everyone comes out of the woodwork. These are opportunities, as was the murder of Valerie Schwab. All of these things are opportunities for those vested with agendas to come out of the woodwork. And in this case, it will resonate with me as one of the, and when I say high points, I don't mean I felt good about it. But when they're ready to put me in the box and they say, you had 2 careers, and when you were on the radio and doing news, what were the things, where were the hash marks? What were the events that you'll remember forever? And of course, the elections of Barack Obama and then Donald Trump on a national scene, some other, many, many issues locally. But one of the high points, and when I say high points, it left an indelible mark at me, was when Valerie Schwab was murdered. And there was no one, and I really have to say this about the people on the right who could have brought forth an agenda and didn't, because the people that murdered her were of color, and she was not. But even they recognized that this one had nothing to do with color. It was teenagers engaged in the stupid things that they sometimes do, and there were undertones of drugs and everything else. The people in this altercation knew one another. But nonetheless, the far left here in New Rochelle and Westchester, but mostly here in New Rochelle, turned it into an opportunity to press their racial agenda. With good intentions, we're sure, but nonetheless, it and with no pun intended, it colored the whole issue for the last 2 years. And lo and behold, out of that comes an overqualified woman. And true, in terms of in a perfect world, my God, she's suing for reverse discrimination. We have a tender racial issue here in the high school and in the school system. Not from a standpoint of optics, the best hire, some say. And I understand that complaint. But aside from that, it boils down to this. This super qualified, uber qualified woman who, based on our Constitution and our system of laws, has every right to sue for what she thinks is a grievance, and a grievance that I happen to agree with, by the way, because by any standard, unless someone can come in here and you're welcome, you can sit in any of these chairs, you could stand there. I will listen. I will shut up. Convince me that Carranza's not a racist, and we'll talk. But we'll talk even if you can't convince me. Because I need to understand this. Because you took someone like me, a champion of civil rights, right up to he was almost 70 years old, and you put me at arm's length. And you, in my view, those hard left people here in town, and again, they may have good reasons, and I know some of them, and they're wonderful human beings, and I'm not doing a Trump here. But you put me at arm's length with your cause. You, or this part of your cause, you took the credibility away from the movement by putting an agenda before reality. So this woman comes in, overqualified. You spend an hour with her, you'll vote for her. You spend an hour with her, you'll vote for mayor, for God's sakes. She is as good as it gets. And if she felt wrong, she has every right to pursue it. Now, again, bad optics, I don't know from what that means, but we need to talk about that, and we're going to open up the phones in a moment. Now, we're also going to talk about the development commissioner. Now, whenever there's a lawsuit, we're very careful. Now, we'll reach out to him and give him time to come on this program, and if the lawyer for the victim in this case, I mean, we know he was roughed up, wants to come on, we'll make time for him too. We know all those players. But even here, all of a sudden, and this is where attorneys, now I got, one of my favorite people on the planet is one of the greatest attorneys in America. And he is, of course, Murray Richmond, defense attorney. And I kid him about this all the time. And I kid some of the other attorneys who come on the show all the time. Why are you guys allowed to make up stories, both either to help your client, who you are doing something for in a civil case, or particularly his defense lawyer? You can pretty much make up any conceivable scenario as in an effort to create reasonable doubt. Well, here we have, once again, you can sense the agendas. When you go on Facebook, and this is neither to defend nor support the development commissioner, but you go on Facebook and you see all the people who would hate this, not all of them, that's not fair, Robert, that's me talking to me, but you see the people who hate the city who, if tomorrow Noam Bramson and the people who run the city, all of the people, if they cured cancer tomorrow, would interpret it as some sort of a plot against humanity. So you almost have to throw out those outliers. And the development commissioner has not always been user-friendly. You know, like the line in The Godfather, you know, and I can actually quote this now because of the kind of radio we're on, when he gets accused of slapping Fredo. I'm smart, that Fredo. And he says, hey, Michael, I got a business to run. Sometimes I got to kick ass to make it run right. And he did not accomplish what he did in this city, always with a sweet hand and a great bedside manner. And everybody acknowledges that. There's no sense hiding that. Louis Sargon was a tough guy. And he clearly, what he did, he should not have done. I'm not debating that. But what I'm saying is now all the usual suspects are coming out. It's noteworthy that the lawyer for the accused, for not the accused, for the victim, and we don't want to blame the victim here. The victim was the victim. And Luis has to answer for that. But now, who comes out of the woodwork but the guy that ran for mayor against Noel Branson 12 years ago? And a Trump-supporting right-wing African-American is now taking up the cause of, and we're not sure if it was a minority or not, but taking up the cause. And that he has every right to do that. I mean, we know him. He's a good guy. But you can feel the political undertones already. Like today in the paper, what gives the attorney for the accused, and they do it, it's not just him, what gives the attorney, rather, for the victim to say that he ought to be fired, that Mr. Why do they do this? You're not the judge, you're the attorney. Richard St. Paul, by the way, there's an attorney, I'm sorry. I know all these players, I've interviewed them, we've had Richard on. He ran for, so now you're saying, okay, he ran for mayor. How, and now he finally, some will say, has his claws in the administration that beat him. And no one, for good or ill, represents the administration, the current administration, more than the man around whom everyone rallies. Now, there are those listening to this who say, well, come on, Bob, this development is tough. That's not the issue. The issue is you elected 6 or 7 councilmen and women. They represent you. It's a Republican form of government. They voted unanimously for this. You've got an issue with this? Don't vote for the mayor next week. Don't vote for your city councilman or woman next week. But this is the plan they came up with. This is what they did. This is what you, because you came out or didn't come out on election day 4 years ago, 8 years ago, or 12 years ago, this is what you voted for. So if you don't like the development, that is not an excuse to make him guilty before he goes to trial. It's not a good reason for Richard St. Paul, in my humble view, but we'll get him on, to say that the Development Commissioner ought to be fired. You know, every single one of you listening to my voice, when you make a mistake, you want forgiveness or you want a second chance until it's somebody you don't like. Shoot him, fire him, get rid of him. I don't know if that's what they should do. That's what they should do. The city has an optics problem. Again, we're back to optics, just like we have in the Fayho case. And I am hoping, and yeah, I am putting a stake in the ground. I'm going back to that issue now because the similarities here are the people with an agenda have an excuse to drive their agenda. Again, I will have anyone in here. I will meet with you. I'll go to lunch with you. I will tape my mouth. Convince me why Fayho shouldn't be the superintendent. And the minute you tell me that, well, it's because no one white can ever sue for prejudice. And you know what? You just lost the intellectual argument. And I have to say next, because that's words. That's wordsmithing. We have to go out and get someone who's a specialist in rhetoric to say, all right, let's define biased. I don't care what damn word you use. If I am decided or I am the party of a decision or the subject of a decision that has to do with my race or creed or religion, that's bias. And if she felt she didn't get a job that she deserved because of the very open bias, I think she's got an open and shut case of the racist. And it was really hard for me to finally come out and call him a racist. But when I saw the slides that he makes the teachers in New York City look at, Carranza's a racist. People here in New Rochelle, stop using him as your model. Because he is intellectually inept in this way. He's driving an agenda. The agenda used to be a higher principle, freedom. Now, yes, did we need affirmative action? Yes, we do. Is there white privilege? Yes, there is. Do we need to be sensitive to it? Absolutely. But to throw in the powerfully toxic, miserable word in your slides to your teachers that things like a sense of urgency, a commitment to excellence, and passion for the written word are signs of white supremacy, you're racist. And more importantly, you're using your racism or to support Ms. Fayho, your reverse racism to justify your wrong-headed agenda. My monologue today. That was pretty good. 6:42. The phones are open. And again, please, in a more warm tone. The reason we created this radio station and the reason I'm here spouting opinions as well as doing news, and we separate the two, is we really do want the dialogue. And so I threw a little passion into it. But what is troubling me is I'm not talking about the people on the fringes. There are a couple of people that want this school commissioner out that have the intellectual capacity of a grape. But there are also others with deep backgrounds in the civil rights movement, with deep backgrounds in thought and decency that disagree with me. Help me. Convince me. Remember they had that guy from Baltimore? My last comment about the school system. When we had all of these problems, after Valerie Schwab died, they hired some guy from Baltimore who was an expert on, school violence and fixing it all up. And I asked him on the phone, we were doing a press conference, and I said to the guy, I had a simple question. He came out with this whole plan of things he wanted to do and a task force. Now, being an old executive and an old corporate guy, I ran many a task force. But when you run a task force, first you have to identify the problem. So all I did was say, oh, this is great that you're doing that, sir. Can you tell us how you identified the problem, what the problem is? There is no problem. Excuse me. There is no problem. What do you mean there's no problem? We got a dead woman. We have everybody running around the streets upset. 1,000 people at City Hall. You're telling me there's no problem. There's no problem. What we need to do is be sure that everybody gets a fair shake. And what weasel? Yeah, of course we need to be sure that everybody gets a fair shake. I need to be sure that I have a nice lunch today. I need to be sure that Kate Upton will leave Justin Verlander and come to me. I need to be sure that I win the lottery tomorrow. And right away, I knew I was dealing with an agenda-driven fraud. And folks, try and remember the source here. I'm not some right-wing weenie that's gone off the right-wing deep end. We're talking about pretty much a lifelong liberal who had cold water thrown in his face one night in the auditorium at the high school when I saw something so agenda-driven that we left the land of truth and went into the land of fantasy and agenda-driven politics. So, the bottom line, treat Fayho fairly, would you? Well, even if you think that it's a bad optic, treat her fairly. She's overly qualified. She's terrific. And if you spend an hour with her, you'll agree with her. In fact, some people who didn't want her are saying, yeah, I know she's good, but we can't have her here because that's what all the rest of the guys want. And I'm whispering now, we can't have her because they don't want her. I would vote for her if I could. Similarly, do not confuse the fact, and it's easy to do, I've been there, that Luis Aragon, because he's not always user-friendly, that he should be pillared, waterboarded, and run out of town on a rail. Let's be fair to all these people. 914-222-3141. 914-222-3141. Sarah Langlois will be in directly in about 15 minutes' time or so. Jeannie Zano's in the house today. Mondaire Jones, the man who chased... I know the Democrats, some of them are outside now at the train station. Please don't say it. Who, at least on paper, it appears that he chased the August long-term, and actually a very nice woman, but hey, we got to talk truth here. Mondaire Jones is the woman that chased her out of politics, Nita Lowy. And Al Tarantino joins us. I told him 8:20 yesterday. I'm moving him to 8:35. I left him a message. Maybe he got it. Ivar Hayden at 8:50 and Harlan Ullman at 9:05. We will be right back with weather, and we'll kind of do a nice little reset for you. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone. And see, this is what happens when I get late to coffee. Morning. Wish I can get rid of this frog. It comes every day this time of year. It's 6:47. It is Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. It is 57. The temperature's rising, but the rain will not stop. Off and on, it's a light drizzle. We'll have a lot of muckety-mucks out at the train station today because it is the pre-election week and early voting is taking place. To that end, Sarah Langlois will be joining us, District 5 here in New Rochelle. She's running against Sarah Kay. We've reached out, and some of these people, again, I'm going to ride this horse. Talk about an agenda. Here's an agenda that I have. You run for office and you don't put your phone number on your website, I'm not voting for you. You could come down from the clouds almighty with a halo on, and I'm not voting for you. You know, don't make yourself hard to reach if you want to run for office, because I know you'll even be harder to reach when you get there. I ain't no idiot. I'm smart. I can do things. I'm not done like everybody says. It's 6:48. I don't know what's wrong with me today. But hey, you know, if you're listening, this is what you signed up for. All righty, let's take a look at the weather. And the weather today is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. A double check of the weather up on our screen. It's 57. On its way to 65 today, but precip 50%. Periods of drizzle. The temperature 68 throughout the day, dropping down. That's the high, but it's going to level off about 65. Tonight, increasing clouds with more rain late at night. The temperature 60. Tomorrow, cloudy with periods of, if you guess it, you don't get a prize, periods of rain. It's going to get up to 71. I'll have to lose the sweater, I guess, tomorrow. The wind will be out of the south, 5 to 10. You're looking at the weekend. You want to know what the weekend is? You have to wait 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Friday, mostly sunny skies. The high, 56. That's a fall day. The overnight low will be 36. Ooh, that's getting close to freezing. If we go up county, we may even have a little frost. Saturday, sunshine through high, thin clouds. The high only 52. The overnight low getting down to 39. And Sunday, sunny, mostly sunny skies. The high will be 51 degrees. Hey, speaking of the weather, do you ever feel you're living your life like lurching and lunging and trying to get to the weekends just to get a break because you work your butt off all week? That's a tough way to live. And yet we all do it. It takes you out of the moment, doesn't it? That's why I'm doing this. At least I love this. Well, I do, and I always have. And that's why, you know, when I came to do this, a lot of people say, oh, you're going to talk bad about your old radio stations? Absolutely not. That I got to do this lifelong dream for now over 15 years. I will always be grateful to the previous radio stations that hired me, particularly the first and last one, which are the same, always. And I know it's not good radio. I should be creating this friction. Well, I won't do it. Of course, you always have your issues in every job, but hey, when someone lets, or something, or some entity allows you to make your dreams come true, you should always pay your respect to that. So, by the way, for those of you who travel, and there was a time I did a lot of business travel, LaGuardia, trying to get to LaGuardia or JFK, just nightmarish, but be that as it may, a $3.9 billion new terminal. This stuff gets more and more expensive. The older I get, I remember when 1,000 was a lot of money. Then millions. Remember, for those of you of a certain age, do you remember that show Millionaire? John Bears for Tipton. And he would come to your house and say, this man has 60,000 acres, he's rich, and he's leaving you $1 million. I mean, good grief, your blood pressure shot up if you thought it was you and you were all excited. Now, after taxes, $1 million doesn't even fund an IRA. And I think the thing that changed it was the financial crisis in 2008 when they talked billions like it was nothing. And it makes you wonder, the government, about $700-800 million to bail out Wall Street. Although they got that money back, we forget that. They did get the money back, and they bailed out a couple of the car companies, and they, again, got the money back. And they got it back with interest. But because of the politics in our country, both on the right and left, everybody drives their agenda to destroy. Agendas are the water that distills and waters down the truth, unfortunately. But that was a good job that Obama did. He doesn't get credit for. Just like now, the economy's pretty good. The current president doesn't get credit for that either. We just bash them at whatever's available to bash them with. So, all righty, 914-222-3141. If you'd like to join the conversation, we are here. Now, on a national level, the White House and Trump allies in Congress slammed a draft impeachment resolution that would allow GOP Intelligence Committee members to request subpoenas only after they voted on by the Democratic-controlled panel. And they didn't like that idea, although that's pretty much how these committees work. But more importantly, yesterday, President Trump's Ukraine advisor, his very Ukraine advisor now, testified yesterday that he shared concerns with a government lawyer that national security could be undermined after a phone call between Trump and Ukraine's president. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was the first current White House official to testify behind closed doors in the impeachment inquiry. Vindman, Director of European Affairs on the National Security Council and a decorated Iraq War veteran, has a Purple Heart, yada, yada, yada. He had been subpoenaed and arrived on time. He was the first who had actually listened. He actually listened on the July 25th call. And this is the call that prompted a complaint from a so-called whistleblower. In his opening statement, Vindman, who immigrated in 1979 at the age of 3, by the way, with his parents from the Ukraine, said, "I was concerned by the call." This is a direct quote. "I did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen, and I was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine." He went on to say, "I realized that if Ukraine pursued an investigation into the Bidens and Burisma," that's the company, by the way, that his son worked for, I believe, "it would likely be interpreted as a partisan play, which would undoubtedly result in Ukraine losing the bipartisan support it had thus far maintained." Nice little nuance. Now, if you want to say that it's not an impeachable offense, I might be with you. We'll leave that up. In fact, we don't know. We don't have any precedents. If the Senate says it is, and that includes the Republicans, then it is. If they say it's not, then it's not. Democrats, get over it. But please, please, don't tell me that it wasn't quid pro quo. Don't even try anymore. I'll listen, but you're going to fall on deaf ears. What I will listen to, though, is, has it happened before? Probably. But they got away with it. Or it wasn't prosecuted properly. It's like everything else. I mean, John Cotty, how many times was he acquitted? But it is what it is. And again, to really understand our Constitution, to really understand the impeachment process, we will be setting the precedent if it actually gets to the Senate, if it actually becomes a law, if you will, a trial, an impeachment trial. And it will boil down to Republican senators. And they will not only be writing history, they will be setting the standard for the bar, really, or at least within the specific theater of asking a foreign government to intervene in some way, shape, or form with a private citizen for the purposes of electoral benefit. If they say, and yeah, it really is that simple. And Democrats are going, what do you mean they get a chance to decide? That is our system. Same as I'm tired of the president bashing the Democrats because it's our system to keep him honest. Well, guess what? The Republicans have the Senate, and it will be on their hands to figure out if it's impeachable. Again, this is one of the few areas in our world where there is no precedent. And so, yes, the Republican senators will have that decision to make, and we all would and should live with it. Let's move on. This is the other side of the political spectrum. A story today, all of us are looking and seeing in the news all of the fires out in California, all of the problems related to the price of gas. There was a piece by Doug McIntyre, one of the greatest radio broadcasters. He just retired to do columns. He used to do Red Eye Radio on WABC. He then did the morning show out in Los Angeles. Only retired maybe 6 or 8 months ago from that. But he wrote a piece. He got gas the other day. It was like $77. He got a gas and energy bill for his house. It's only a 2,000 square foot house. It was like $900. Something happened out in California. And there was a piece by Rich Lowry, who ever since Trump has become more reasonable, he's still a Trump supporter, but he's very reasonable about it. Well worth reading. like a Maureen Dowd in the Times, Rich Lowy in the Post. He says, California is staying true to its reputation as the land of innovation. It is making blackouts, heretofore the signature of impoverishment, and West war-torn lands a routine feature. Electric power and all other goods it makes possible, now I'm skipping and paraphrasing here, is synonymous with modern civilization. It shouldn't be a negotiable good for everyone living in a well-functioned society. Well, the problem is they went too green. They went too much to alternative sources of energy. California Governor Newsom, who has to try to evade responsibility for this debacle while presiding over it, blames dog-eat-dog capitalism for the state's current blackout crisis. But it really has to do with the over-reliance and attempts to go green. We need to go green. We need to save the planet. I believe, as most of you I'm sure do, that global warming is real and we need to deal with it. But we need to do it incrementally and we need to do it carefully. All right, one last item before we go to our 7 o'clock break and get busy with guests and your calls. Excuse me, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. All right. Nearly 3,000 nursing homes across the country received U.S. News World Report's best nursing home designations. Now here are the high-performing long-term and average short-term here in New York. High-performing long-term. Excuse me. St. John's Healthcare in Rochester, Jewish Home of Rochester. 3 in Rochester. Wow. Church Home of the Protestant Episcopal Church in Rochester. Now we get local. The New Jewish Home, Sarah Newman in Mamaroneck, right next door. Chenango Memorial Hospital Skilled Nursing Facility in Norwich. The Friendly Home in Rochester. Rochester, that miserable city, has all these. I'm sorry, Rochester. They have a hockey team there. They have 4 in the top long term. And James G. Johnson Memorial Nursing Home in Johnson City. I could have so much fun with Johnson City. I'm going to let it go. All right, high-performing short-term. Yorktown Rehabilitation and Nursing Center in Cortland Manor. The Wartburg Home in Mount Vernon, United Hebrew in New Rochelle, full disclosure, they sponsor with us, Wingate of Dutchess Fishkill, the Osborne in Rye, and the Clifton Springs Hospital and Clinic for Extended Care. So those are the top ones in New York, and we have several of them right here. And I forgot this very important item in the sports because we talked about the World Series. Hey, the Rangers won. They were getting ready to saddle up to the Jets and Giants and all go into group therapy together. The Devils may still go for you hockey fans. But they brought up a couple of kids yesterday. They benched, and this one broke my heart, veteran Stahl. 32 years old. It's not like he's ancient, but they benched him in favor of a kid. Put him on a contender for his last few years. Let him get out of Dodge. Let these kids do what they have to do. Anyway, they actually played well last night. And 2 of their young kids, Philip Heitel and Kako, the top draft choice that they have, they got goals. And they beat the best team in the league, the Tampa Bay Lightning, or the Rangers South, by a score of 4-1. And, of course, everyone's talking about when they came back yesterday, Tampa Bay, they also returned with New Rochelle native Kevin Shattenkirk, who I will now reach out to that he's with Tampa Bay. I am your Rangers schizophrenic. I love the team, but the people that run MSG, a member and some of the lowest form of creatures on the earth. Under a rock, you might say they live. The way they treated us when we wanted to get Kevin Shattenkirk on the show. Again, anyone in the sound of my voice, and I know men and women who work in this, they can't say what I'm saying. That's what I love about radio. But it's well known throughout the industry that they're miserable creatures. And they want questions before you interview their people. They want to give you the questions to ask. They are over-controlling demons. There will be people with MSG uniforms on for Halloween. And it was then, and you think they'd learn. It was then that I put the curse of the Bambino on the Rangers, and they haven't made the playoffs since. Well, I love this new young team, and I love John Davidson, but he has nothing to do with how they treat the press. He, too, as their coach, is totally under the thumb of the miserable and diseased infrastructure that is Madison Square Garden. Take a breather. We'll be right back. It is 7:02. Give us about 90 seconds and we'll return with the top stories and our lineup for today. You're listening to Radio Westchester. We are live at the New Rochelle train station. I hit the wrong button. This morning's programs are supported by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and their associates on Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Pena & Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and by the way, they're right here in Larchmont, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. It is 7:03, 57 degrees, overcast. We'll have drizzle today. Good morning once again. It is 7:05. Welcome to Radio Westchester on this Wednesday. Indeed, it is Wednesday, and I have no room here. It is Wednesday, October. Can you believe that it's October 30th, 2019? 57 degrees, on its way to 62 or so today. Our top story this morning, as you know, the Development Commissioner, Luis Aragon, pled not guilty yesterday. He was charged with second-degree harassment, and the judge also issued a restraining order versus Mr. Aragon, saying that if he runs into the individual with whom he had a dust-up in the hallways, that he should just simply ignore him and walk away. We also this morning are covering the story of that New Rochelle teacher who he was let go. Actually, he resigned back in April, and the people are saying, the school board is saying, they were unaware of the charges against him or unaware of the crime. We'll find out more about that. But he has been arraigned as well. He just got out of jail. He's walking. He paid bail. And we will cover that story with you. Also, there was an earthquake yesterday. Yes, indeed. In Marrone. It was so small, some people thought it was a truck running by, but nonetheless, pardon me, I wish I could make that stop. But nonetheless, we did have a small earthquake. And that, do you remember Forrest Gump? That's all I have to say about that, Lieutenant Dan. And we've got some job openings in and around the area. Yonkers opens up recruitment for firefighters. The job is cool. It starts at $71,600. And if you go to City Hall in Yonkers, or you go to the fire recruitment office at 1 Larkin Center, they'll give you an application. And so long as you're not, you got to be at least 17 years old in 6 months, but not be older than 29. I'm not qualified. You get a form there. The test is in January 10. That's when you have to get the application, and I'm sorry. The examination will take place on Saturday, April 25th. And let's see what we can find out more about this teacher. We got an update on the story, and so we're going to share it with you. A former New Rochelle High School history teacher is accused of engaging in sexual activity with a teenage student during school hours. This, according to police. Police said that the alleged act... my screen just went blank. You got to love it. You got to love today's computers. Anyway, they said that the alleged sex act is a felony and that the alleged act happened with a 15-year-old student in late spring while he was employed as a teacher. The incident occurred the morning of Wednesday, May 1st, 2019 at the high school. And the teacher's name is John Fraioli, a 34-year-old White Plains resident. He was arrested Monday and charged with third-degree criminal sex act. And that's all we know right now. He is being held at the Westchester County Jail in Valhalla. Actually, he was. He's now since been let out on bail. And that's all we know right now. Again, Fraioli did resign as a teacher effective June 30th. Magda Parvi, interim superintendent of the New Rochelle School District, said in a statement yesterday that his resignation was not related to the allegations that led to his arrest, and she added that the district was not aware of the allegations when he resigned. As we noted, Parvi did not say why Fraioli resigned, and we are deeply disturbed to learn of the allegation, she says, involving a former employee of the district. It's coming up on 7:08. A Portchester man is accused of sexually abusing a child several times in the first half of 2016. Furman James, 45, was arrested by Portchester police on Tuesday and charged with second degree, a course of sexual conduct against a child. The victim, who prosecutors said was under the age of 13 at the time, told a friend and then her mother about the abuse. The victim was subjected to several acts of sexual conduct on several occasions. Bail was set at $20,000, and he's scheduled to return to village court for a felony hearing on November 4. And we thank Chris Eberhardt in the Journal News for that story. And in case you're on another planet or you don't care for baseball, last night, exciting game. The Washington Nationals defeated the monster himself, Justin Verlander, and they're headed to a seventh game, the final match, the rubber match, tonight in Houston, Texas. And we saved the top story for last. The city's development commissioner and architect behind the unprecedented redevelopment of the downtown has been charged in connection with a physical altercation with a worker in Trump Plaza and has pled not guilty. He was charged with second-degree harassment and is scheduled to be arraigned in New Rochelle City Court. Actually, he was arraigned yesterday. And he lives in the Trump building in New York, in New Rochelle rather, and was caught on a building's camera shortly after 6 a.m. at Friday yelling at a security guard who was delivering newspapers in the tenant elevator. Aragon can be seen motioning for the security guard to get off the elevator. Aragon said this is an elevator for staff, and there is one for staff and one for residents. And the guard was using the one for residents, as we said. He claimed he was called a homophobic slur during a verbal dispute before grabbing the cart of newspapers from the security guard, tossing it in the hallway, and then grabbing the guard by the back of his shirt and pushing him in to the hallway. And he's gone on record, Mr. Aragon has. I'm very sorry for what I did. I know better than to get physical. I was jet-lagged and tired and lost my cool. Meanwhile, the attorney for the victim in this case has said that Mr. Aragon should be fired, and he doesn't believe Mr. Aragon's claim that he was called a homophobic slur. He also, let's see, okay, not he, but the judge also granted a temporary restraining order against the development commissioner. Again, this was done by Richard St. Paul, the attorney for the victim. And the judge, though, did say to Mr. Aragon in court, do yourself a favor and and now I'm paraphrasing, just ignore this employee when you see him. But nonetheless, the restraining order is in effect, and Richard St. Paul wants him fired. Again, though, we talked a little bit about this later. Old agendas may be coming out. He ran for mayor in the city several years ago, Richard St. Paul did, and he's not a fan of the administration. Now, that shouldn't affect his efforts in court. He's an attorney, and a good one by all accounts. But nonetheless, it's interesting how these things line up. Excuse me. An NYPD cop was stripped of his gun after revealing that he's on antidepressants. Now, this is an interesting one. We're going to try and get our buddy on, Mike Duffy, to talk about this. And this is a sticky wicket, folks. He admitted that he had depression. He said that they put me on some antidepressants and they took his gun away. And the reason they took his gun away is why a lot of people, by the way, this is an interesting paradox, want more control over guns in general. Because guns make it very easy to kill yourself. They're convenient, they're there, and during the worst of a depressive episode, it's just easy to take your own life. Knowing this, they took the gun. However, there are different levels of depression. There are people who will be on antidepressants their entire lives, and there are probably some who are cops. Now they're saying, I better not come forward. 12-year veteran of NYPD, Jonathan Oliveira, said he was made an outcast after admitting in August he'd gotten mental health treatment. Wow, I would have just been better off if I kept my mouth shut, he said. And he told the Post this in an emotional interview. When they took my gun, the way they did it, they called the desk and they told them coming in to take my firearm, so they need someone to go to my locker. The whole command knew. Now, it got worse over the next 2 months as he was transferred 5 times, placed on modified duty with no path back to becoming a full officer, and is currently stuck in a post where the department hides cops who screw up. The stress has affected his marriage, triggered anxiety attacks, and got him drinking again. Oliveira's experience, which came as the NYPD struggled to change rank-and-file culture amid a spate of 10 officer suicides, is exactly what keeps cops from seeking help. We're going to get somebody on because there are all kinds of spokes to this story. If someone has a serious enough, and you'd have to take a psychiatrist's word for it, type of depression where they think he's a threat, yeah, you should take his gun away. But if he's simply dealing with depression or maybe an alcoholic problem, and Lord knows it's probably because of the stress of the job, a lot of alcoholic cops, and it doesn't mean that cops are alcoholics, by the way, but it doesn't mean we should be taking their guns away. But more importantly, and this is an issue in all macho things, sports, the military, the police, fire. If we want people to be honest, we need to treat them better. We need to not shun them because they come forward and admit to a mental illness. It's one of the reasons why we have so many people taking their lives rather than dealing with the problem. So when we get a chance, we will deal with that story. All righty, let's take a look. Oh, I see a text coming in. Oh, there goes my little broken tiny easel. I have to jump off at 7:50. Jeannie, oh my goodness. Jeannie Zano, who'll be calling in at 7:35 today, says she has to get back to baking. This I want to see. Or even hear about. Professor Jeannie Zano, she will be with us at 7:35. Coming up in just a few minutes, we will be talking with Sarah Langlois. She's running here in District 5 for the position of City Council. She's running against Sarah Kay. Again, we have reached out to her, and we'll try and get her on as well. What's been interesting in this race, there have been a number of people who we've invited on, and they've been very slow to commit to coming on, and that has been a little troubling. But nonetheless, Sarah Langlois is coming up in just a few minutes. She will be with us. Jeannie Zano after that. Mondaire Jones, the man that chased Anita Lowy off of the candidacy to run one more time. Now, again, I'm having a little fun with this. I don't know that his saying he would primary her gave her the final thought to get out of Dodge. But nonetheless, she's not running again, and now everyone else is coming forward. But the man who opened the door, the man who again, ended the career of Nita Lowy, as August as that career was. Mondaire Jones will be with us at 8 o'clock. Al Tarantino at 8:35, Eva Hayden at 8:50, and then at 9:05, Harlan Ullman. Right now, it is 57 degrees at 7:16. We're going to make way for Sarah Langlois in just a moment or two. Today's program is brought to you by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhdc.com. Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. You can call us here at 914-727-2726, 914-727-2726. And we'll arrange for you to come in and experience virtual reality right here in our studios. Or if you have a party, a bar mitzvah, a birthday event, a wedding, an engagement, or you just want to celebrate being alive and have a good time, give us a call. Once again at 914-727-2726. And we'll bring plug-in virtual reality to you. Stay right there. Lots more to come. I want to shout out to Anthony Galetta this morning. I don't know what time he gets up, but I wake up and I look at my phone and I've got a text from some callers or some guests before I come on with news. Updates from all the different news services. My phone goes ping, 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 ping. I would wake up even if I didn't set an alarm. And so I get all these news updates, and one of them, and it's just to show you how people roll, and I'll come right to it. As many of you know, during my radio career, in the middle of it, I also was the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce here. And in that job, I got to do many ribbon cuttings of all these new buildings that were going up. And he made sure to send me a photograph of me and the development commissioner. And just to go on the record, thank you, Anthony. That was Anthony's way of sticking it in my ribs, but having fun, of course. But I was kind of glad because it established the point I made earlier today. You know, we need to treat people as individuals and not gang up. And I know I'm tilting at windmills here and not gang up on them because we don't like their politics or we don't like sometimes the way they react to people. We don't like their bedside manner. Or worse still, we don't like what they've accomplished. Or perhaps we don't like what they accomplished because they accomplished things that we never could. And of course, and it may sound like I'm being an apologist. No, I'm taking the John Adams position that he took after the famous Boston Massacre. It's that facts are stubborn things. Let's wait for the facts to come out and forget whether you like someone or not. Let's let that happen. The example I always use, though, I realize what karma is. This is not my first rodeo. I didn't just fall off a turnip truck. My favorite example is the great radio host, one of my heroes, Don Imus, who just really stepped in it, really stepped on his toes when he tried to make fun of those basketball players, women basketball players, African-American basketball players. And he deserved to be put in the penalty box for it. No question about it. But the level at which people went after him, and this is reality, it's just the way the world works, and I get it, is because he just isn't off the air a nice person. He just doesn't treat people very well. And unfortunately, that weighed in on how he was treated and how long he was off the air, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because if you listen to his show over the years, rumor aside, he was a very progressive guy and just unfortunate. But nonetheless, you treat people badly, and sometimes it comes around to get you. But we can't allow that to let us throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, Sarah Langlois is supposed to be here. It is 7:20. She is the Republican candidate here for District 5, so we expect her to be stopping in momentarily. But we're going up to the phones, 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. And so what we do is we check the source. Maybe she tried to call us. It's always possible. And said, I can't make it today. No, we don't have a phone call. Let's see if we have an email. Because that does happen, folks. It really does happen. All right, 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. And I have another issue to talk about, and we mentioned it the other day as well. I have a grandson who plays hockey. Here we go. Someone is calling in. Who might this be? Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Good morning. It's Denise Ward for Bob.
Hi, Denise. How are you? Thank you for calling. Folks,
You're welcome.
Denise Ward is a talk show host in her own right at my old radio station. I never had problems mentioning them, WVOX. It was the home of my love. They gave me my shot in radio, and I'm still grateful to them. And I'm sure you're kicking butt as usual. What's on your mind? And thank you for calling.
Thank you, Bob. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to you. Congratulations on your show.
Well,
I wanted to comment on what you were saying before about, I guess we'll call it karma, and people's reactions to...
Please do.
And we know we're talking about the commissioner.
Thank you.
And my answer to that would be perhaps we ought to do a little research into the commissioner, because my research shows that he's got a history of this.
Of this very thing? I know he has a history for having a very bad bedside manner.
No, very bad treatment of people who work with him, for him, around him, who he does not think are equal to him.
What you're talking about is elitism. Say more about that. And by the way, I have to go quickly because one of the candidates from your party just walked in.
Not
Sarah
my party.
Langlois. Oh, I'm sorry. I understand. Would you do me a solid? Let me look at this because I don't want to be rude to the candidate.
Sure. No, you take Sarah. I can call you back later, maybe.
No, but wait. Let me look. Can you call me back at 7:50?
Yes, I think I should be ready.
Please do. I'm really glad to get a call from...
A cup of coffee then, so that's not good.
Oh, well, that's good. Have a cup of... Nah, that's okay. I really appreciate this call more than you know. It's great to hear your voice. You know, I've tried not to bug people who I know are on the air elsewhere because, you know, I don't want them to put them in a tough spot. But I'm so glad you called. You stay right there and call us back at 7:50. But how nice. Denise Ward called us. She is here. Oh, she's all done up. That's not supposed to be an issue. Sarah Langlois is here. She's in the studio, and we want to get right to her because she needs to be heard. Ms. Langlois, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Leaning on that mic. How do you like our digs here?
I love this space.
Yeah, everybody.
I'm so excited to finally be here and see it.
Yeah, when everybody comes in fact, I even tell people, we had meetings yesterday with some sponsors, and I remind them, you know, naturally I go out with my hat in hand, but I say you got to come and see it because it makes all the difference in the world. And I tell them when we put this screen out front and your name, your business is on it, and all these people have to walk by, they have no choice if they park. Anyway, it's a wonderful space, but what's more wonderful is our political system. You are running in the District 5 here in New Rochelle as a Republican, which some would say is an uphill climb, but nonetheless, we had you on last week, and you talked about how the incident, in fact, I did a monologue about it today, the incident in our school about a year and a half ago or so got your attention, and ever since you've wanted to get involved. Tell us why you want to run for District 5.
That's right. The more that I learn about the city, the more involved that I want to be. So last year it really started with the school district in response to the violence at New Rochelle High School. Mm-hmm. And the more that I learn, the more I see that, you know, changes need to happen. I think we're on a good path, but the development is very concerning to a lot of people in the city, and the taxes are really concerning. And so I'm here to stay. I have a young family, and
yeah,
so
I guess I met your daughter back at St. Patrick's Day.
Yes,
was it?
I think one of them was sleeping.
Oh, you have two?
I have two. I have a 4 and a 2-year-old. Two girls.
How come you look so well rested? You two and a 4-year-old.
Well, I did leave them at my mom's house
last
night.
Again, our guest, Sarah Langlois. Remember, early voting. It's this week. And, of course, Election Day in a few days on the 5th. But if you want to vote for her, it's on. You can go right now. You can go over to Buford Street. It's in the back of City Hall and vote. She's running in District 5. She's running against, well, the first name's the same, Sarah, but Sarah Kay. Now, Sarah Langlois, you want to make changes. You're concerned about development. Say your piece.
Sure. So I think that we have some issues with the infrastructure. That's something that we need to look at. We're not sure the accurate number of students that are coming into our school district. Mm-hmm. I'm also hearing about an upgrade that needs to happen to our sewer system, which is very concerning. And then as far as police and fire, those essential services, we really need to look at those because we want to make sure that everybody stays safe in the city. We're expecting a lot of new residents.
You know, I was doing a little bit of research the other day, part of what we do with the news, and there is something coming to light about this that obviously you touched on. the sewer systems, the infrastructure. Now, a couple of years ago, the city bonded for 10 years, and my tiny brain said, oh, we're all covered for that. Now I'm hearing, and perhaps after the election, that we've got a surprise bill coming off, maybe has something to do with water and our water bills. What can you tell us about that?
Right, that's what I've heard. I can't confirm it because it's just sort of the word on the street.
Well, your running mate mentioned it last week, too, as
Okay.
well. Brandon mentioned it, Brandon Comroy, that there's going to be a bill that involves when we pay our water bills.
Right, it's an
outflow.
An outflow.
No, it's an outflow of our money, actually.
Right. Yes, it certainly is. So,
And police and fire, what are you concerned about in that regard?
just that we have enough staff to cover all of the new buildings and the new residents. We don't want that to take away from the resources of the residents who already live here, right? I think we need to increase that. I think that that's a no-brainer.
Okay. What else? What else concerns you? We have the new school chancellor, the new school superintendent starts in 2 days.
Wow, November.
Can
is
you
coming
believe
up
it? November
quickly.
1st, it's going to be here, and your children will soon be in the school system.
That's right. I have another year until my daughter starts kindergarten. So I just really hope that the new superintendent comes in and we start to focus on achievement and get back to, the excellent school district that we once were.
Well, I'm hopeful for that too. My guest, Sarah Langlois, she's running for City Council in District 5 here in New Rochelle. She's running against Democrat Sarah Kay. You get elected. Let's assume you get elected and January comes around. What are the first issues you're going to put your nose to the grindstone about? What will you work
Sure.
about?
So-
What would you work on first?
One of the things that is of particular concern to me is how we release our budget. So our budget is released November 10th, and we have an election November 5th. So I think that needs to be changed. I would like to see a budget prior to Election Day.
It just hit me like a ton of bricks. You're right. We're not going to hear about the outflow until the inflow of Oaks is done.
That's right. So I think people, need to arm themselves with information to make the best decisions. And I think having access to that budget is really important. I did contact the mayor and city council requesting it ahead of time. I asked for it before the early voting started, but they said that it wouldn't be ready by then. Well, I didn't get an answer from the mayor or city council. I got an answer from Chuck Strom.
Okay, you got a better shot of getting into that committee in Washington than
getting
you do getting that
budget.
budget before Election Day. And I would say that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, that's just how politics is done. So that's the first thing you do. You would be sure that the budget came out before Election Day.
Correct.
What else would you? That's a meaty issue. What else would you do? How dare you? What do you mean you want transparency? You're going to be a politician.
Transparency,
You're going to be a
exactly.
politician. What's wrong with you?
Well, I'm not really a politician. I don't
know.
look at myself that way. I haven't been brought up, through a political
Clearly.
organization at all. So, and I do think that's a big difference between myself and my opponent. I kind of got involved in response to events that were happening, really local issues. And from what I understand, she's kind of been brought up through the political party. So.
Well, it's been hard. We've had a hard time getting through to her and getting her on. So we're hopeful
okay.
that we wanted to get her on one more time before the election because we'll go in terms of candidates. And my old boss used to hate this. We go dark next week. After Monday, you're all on your own. But I wanted to get everybody on as much as I could and make it available.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
Trangucci, Martha Lopez. Lou came on once. Martha's come on 3 times. She's got one more hit, I think, Friday. So, okay, that is a good issue. That's
like
stark.
that, huh?
I like it only because it's clear. Someone listening says, "Oh yeah, the budget comes out the 10th. We elect on the 5th." That's like voting on the meal before you eat it.
Correct.
What else you got? What else will you do when you get the job?
So another thing that's really concerning to me is our preservation of historical properties. So like the barn at Ward Acres is in my district.
I know the barn well.
And I remember going to the haunted house there in high school. Those are my last memories of it. And
They had
it
a
was
haunted
scary
house
place
there. That
then.
must have been great. Well, now it's a scary and dangerous place. It's falling apart. And
Right.
full disclosure, when I ran the Chamber of Commerce, we used to keep our floats in there and sometimes work in there. It's falling apart, and it's such beautiful land.
It is. It is. I think that it should be restored. So I think that any future developments, I think that our developers should put money into a preservation fund to put money into these buildings, like the Armory and the Barnett Ward Acres. I think that that's really important. I think that while we're moving forward and modernizing the city, that we really need to take a look back at our history.
Judy, you've just made history. I've been on the air here in New Rochelle for 15 years, and at least for my ears, my old ears, it's the first time someone took the Armory and the Ward Acres barn and put them together. That is an interesting, in that way, because as you know, there was a period of time, and even if I bring it up now, the phones will light up. The Armory sucks the air out of the room. People are so passionate about it, and the political intonations of it as well. But Ward Acres has kind of been. People know it's. Well, here's what people do know. Those of us in the news know that the biggest problem with Ward Acres isn't the money so much as it is the people that live around that area. They're not crazy about wanting it fixed. They like that nobody goes there. And that's one of the dirty little secrets you learn in the news. So maybe, just maybe, you'll get through to people. What else you want to work on?
Parking. Parking is
don't mention parking. You're going to get me all upset.
Parking, okay, I can speak about another big thing is the commercial development.
Yes.
I think that our taxes are high. We need something to ease the tax burden. So commercial development would be great. More
there's
offices.
There's this theory that, build it and they will come, that all this new foot traffic and buying power will make that happen. How do you feel about that?
I hope that they're right.
But that's what you'll do.
I think, right, but I think that people from the north end would be more likely to come downtown if there was parking. That's a big complaint that I hear, parking. And then people want to go to the doctor's office down here. They don't want to have to leave New Rochelle.
Question,
Spend your money in your own community.
Did someone coach you to say, bring up parking to Bob Marrone? You'll totally get him off his game. And it's just, I went to this place in the Bronx yesterday for a meeting, and where Montefiore Hospital is. Do you know where it is?
Yes.
It'll be easier to get to the moon than it'll ever be to get to the office I went to yesterday. If you want to get to the moon or even get to Mars in 4 years, go down to that Montefiore complex in the Bronx and just see if you can get where you're going. I'm sorry. I see what you do. You mentioned parking. What happens to me? Hey, listen, before you go, and I'm really glad you walked in, and I want to wish you the very best of luck, but I also want you to take this 2 minutes. Tell people why they ought to vote for Sarah Langlois. And I will reset again. Sarah Langlois is running for District 5 City Council here in New Rochelle. She's on the Republican line. You can vote today. Go to City Hall, Buford Place, in the back of City Hall. You can vote for her today. You can vote for her right through Sunday, not Monday, or on Election Day. Tell people why they ought to vote for you.
So I am truly an independent voice. I'm a free agent in this game. So I think it's really important that we make the best decisions for District 5 and for our city. And I think that we can only do that without all of these political ties. I'm a big believer in that. I think that currently, the big focus is on these national issues that are very polarizing, and people really need to get involved and pay attention to what's going on locally. These are the issues that affect you. And I would love to be the voice, to make some changes and to really turn things positive and bring a lot of positive change to the city. And hopefully I will get your vote on November 5th.
Sarah Langlois, thank you very, very much for coming in. We have another titan of New Rochelle coming on. Do you know Professor Jeannie Zaino, by the way?
No, I don't.
Yeah, she's a professor of political science at Iona. Now, unlike yourself, can you cook?
Yes.
She can't. She sent me a text before saying she's busy baking and can only stay for 10 minutes today. But
okay.
So yeah, see, so in fact, why don't you say hello to her? She's political science, so she'll love that we're doing this. Professor Zaino, good morning.
Good morning, Bob. Yes, I'm just coming out of the kitchen for you.
Did you trip over a saucepan? Professor, I just wanted you to say hello, since we do local politics here, and it's near and dear to your heart as a professor of political science. I don't know where in New Rochelle you live, but she may well be the person you might vote for. Sarah Langlois is running in District 5 for City Council. Say hello, Professor Zaino.
Hello. Am I saying hello? Yes, hello. Good luck on the campaign.
Hello. Thank you very much.
After all politics is local. Do you remember who said that? This is a test.
I do, Tip O'Neill.
Tip O'Neill. All right, so we're going to get to the professor. Sarah Langlois, my best to you. Thank you very, very much for coming in. She's running in District 5 here in New Rochelle. Sarah Langlois running against Sarah Kay. Sarah's on the Republican line. Again, thank you very much for coming into the station at the station. Good morning, Professor. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well and happy to see you always covering local politics. I love it.
Local politics, I'm going to hell, I really am. This is not, no, you see, I can say this now. A candidate comes in and she's striking. That's all I can say in this day and age. And I go, oh my, hello.
I am not responding.
No, I know you're not. No, but no. What I meant was stately, very professionally dressed. As far as the rest of it, I see nothing. Nothing. Okay. Let's get back to this. I'm in a strange mood today. I woke up with a frog in my throat. Now I think I have a whole clan of frogs and fish there. Professor, let's go to the videotape. Yesterday, yet another person goes to the committee. And this guy was on the president's team, and he says he has trouble. In fact, the very guy that's supposed to cover Ukraine for him in the National Security Council, he has trouble with what the president says. Now, I'm just going to posit this and then let you use your expertise. And a reminder, this guest, Ms. Zaino, Professor Zaino, I messed that up. She's a professor of political science at Iona College. She is a presidential historian. She's a consultant as well when she's not busy cooking and being a professor. She is a published, and she writes columns for the Huffington Post and Newsday, and you name it, she does it. She's on Fox a lot. Professor, the president's in trouble if one day the Republicans say he is, isn't he?
He is. If again the party starts to move over, and I think it was telling in the last 48 hours as this testimony occurred, and you heard this really decorated veteran and military officer attacked in some conservative quarters, that he was then defended by people like Liz Cheney, like Kevin McCarthy in the House, like Mitt Romney, even Mitch McConnell, who said, I'm not going to attack somebody's patriotism. So now that's not to say that they are going against the president by any stretch of the imagination, but it is to say that if this testimony keeps mounting against the president like this, and Republicans do indeed decide there is something there, he is going to be in trouble. That hasn't happened yet, but I do think it's notable that they have peeled off on what has been this defense of everybody who comes forward is somehow anti-Trump, a never-Trumper, a stooge for the liberals, not patriotic. They're hitting back at least on that point now.
Professor, let's go back to something you said, the there. I'm sure because of what you do and your presidential historian work that you care a lot about the Constitution, but people keep calling it a constitutional crisis, but in many ways it will be a constitutional, if you will, for lack of a better word, precedent. Because the way I am interpreting the whole impeachment process and what the founding fathers, quote unquote, intended, is that what the president did is a high crime and misdemeanor in this one specific case. Well, if they say it is, and if they say it's not, then it's not, because there's no set of laws that really covers this that would keep them from voting an acquittal. Is that true?
That is true. They purposefully leave it vague. They say you have to have been found to committed a high crime and misdemeanor, and yet they don't say what in fact that is, because what it is, as you just mentioned, is what the House decides it is to hold you over for trial, and then what the Senate decides it is to decide if you're convicted or acquitted. So it really is very much up to the people in those bodies, the people, our representatives, to decide what constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor. And to your point, and this is, I think, what really frustrates Republicans now and what frustrated Democrats back when Clinton was going through this, is that it can be and is highly politicized.
Of course.
And so the debate now is, in fact, is this all politics? Or, in fact, did the president do something that requires he be removed from office? And people have very different opinions on it. There was just a great defense, a legal defense of the president in the Wall Street Journal. And so, I suggest everybody read, not just if you're a Democrat, read what the Democrats are saying that he's guilty, but you read what conservatives are saying, that there is a case to be made. We haven't heard that yet, but it is indeed there, and it is profound and it is moving. So I think, these are not going to be easy decisions, particularly in the Senate, where obviously if Republicans stand by the president, he has a very good chance of being acquitted if it goes that far. And of course, this becomes more fraught because of the timing of an election year.
Well, it certainly does, and it's interesting that you and our friends at the Wall Street Journal go down that path, because it's very true. The president, or people, all of us, myself included, we keep looking at this issue through the prism of the law as we understand it, but this is uncharted territory. There's nothing to cite. There's no title. There's no Section 15. To which I say that, yes, it's clear to me already that there was quid pro quo. But if the Senate doesn't think that quid pro quo rises to the level, the law allows that it shouldn't. And I believe, and again, your reaction, that the law allows this, or as the Constitution does, because of the favor towards the will of the people and politics, this being a political issue and one of votes rather than one of, let's say, jurisprudence.
Yeah, I mean, and this, as you just said, this is not, in the court of law. This is in a political body, and that's where it will be decided. And so, to your point, again, whether he did or did not violate a criminal law, obviously, we don't know the facts, and so we don't know if that happened. We don't know if there was a quid pro quo at this point, but even if he did that is a separate process than it is to decide if he committed a high crime and a misdemeanor. Obviously, people make the case, if you violated the U.S. law and you are president, you should be removed. Then again, Bill Clinton clearly lied under oath. That is clearly illegal, and many people felt at the time and feel today that he should not have been removed from office, and of course he wasn't.
It's fitting that you use the word regarding the Wall Street Journal editorial as moving. One of the words we've been throwing around here is sacred. Another thing to run by you. One thing that's clear to me, and again, but I don't know if it rises to the level of impeachment or at least conviction, is I don't think any president before him has abused power to the extent that he has. So then the question becomes, is that a high crime or misdemeanor? Is it, and so to me, these poor senators, and I actually feel for the Republican senators, they have a very sacred, almost sacred responsibility on their hands now.
They do, absolutely, in making this very, very tough call. One thing I think that we all have to step back and recognize is that this president was elected because he was not, he really did do something that apparently people wanted, which is he said, I'm going to be upfront and open about everything I do. And, so when you say, nobody has abused power in the way he has, I'm not so sure that is the case. What he says on that phone call, I'm not so sure that hasn't been said, behind the scenes quietly with a wink and a nod. But what the difference is, nobody would admit it publicly, of course. And this is a president who, much to his own detriment, says these things up front. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea or something we should welcome. I'm just saying that, I do question this idea that he's the first person to ever have tried to influence a foreign official to get dirt on a political opponent. I think the difference is this became public.
Professor,
and that doesn't make it right or wrong.
No,
but
two things.
It's a reality.
I agree with you totally, and I'm thinking less about that specific case than some of the other things he's done and the way he's wielded his power. Again, to say that one abuses power doesn't mean that it rises to the level of impeachment. Now, talking about this specific incident, I have no doubt that other presidents have done this. No doubt whatsoever, because of the nature of our politics, going all the way back to the Kennedys, at least in my tiny brain. But I often answer those questions. John Gotti was acquitted several times before they finally got him on something. Just because people got away with it doesn't justify you doing it, if indeed that rises to the level.
Absolutely, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that, just because it may have happened in the past that he should skate free on it. What I am saying is it suggests a larger institutional, structural problem with our campaigns rather than something particular to Donald Trump. And I think the danger of this always is the sense people have that if we punish this one person, like if we punish, Exxon for the oil spill, we're good to go. And the fact is that these are much broader, more structural problems that have to be addressed that go well beyond Donald Trump. And I think that's always the danger when we find somebody and hold them up as having acted improperly. And indeed, he may have done just that and would need to be punished. But that still doesn't address the larger issue, nor does it address the fact that Americans in 2016, at least, he won the presidency by making this claim that they felt that many, many politicians in Washington, D.C. were saying one thing and doing another.
Absolutely.
And the example always used is Barack Obama standing up publicly in front of Putin and sort of winking a nod, saying, I'll have much more leeway after the election is over. That's what people were responding to, and getting rid of Trump doesn't get rid of the fact that that still is a problem for all of us.
Absolutely true. I think someone wrote in the New York Times the other day very eloquently that, as paradoxical as it may seem to some, in terms of his personage, he may well be the most honest president we've ever had in terms of what he talks about and says.
Yes.
Because, he's right. The woman that was in here before, very interestingly, you talk about the process. When she's elected, the first thing she wants, now listen to this, Professor, you'll love it. She says, one of the first things I want to do, Bob, I want the budget to come out before Election Day. Now, Election Day is the 5th, the local budget comes out on the 10th, and everybody listening knew and knows that that's deliberate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those are the kinds of things that you can influence once you get in there. I mean, I think that would be a little of an uphill battle in that case, but it's absolutely something that can be done.
Well, how do you think this plays out? Do you think that the president gets impeached and acquitted and then we let the voters do it, or do you think that there's a possibility he'd be voted out of office by the Senate?
You know my powers of prognostication, so if I say it, it's going to definitely happen. So,
by the way, when you put that in the paper that the Titanic was unsinkable, people believed you.
That's right.
Go ahead, Professor.
I think at this point, and this is very, very, unscientific, I think he probably does get impeached and probably does get acquitted, all things remaining equal, and then the voters will decide. I think we need to go back to the reason why Nancy Pelosi was reluctant to engage in this in the first place, and why the president said, go ahead and impeach me, because the political ramifications of this can be huge on both sides. So, that's my best guess, and I think it really is going to make the next election, as we approach next year, just 1 year away, that much more fraught with tension and, obviously a hard-fought battle on both sides.
And work for me. You got 1 minute left. I'm going to mention one name, your reaction. William Barr.
I think that his reputation has been tainted in a way it wasn't when he came in, and I think he's going to have a hard time, not wholly, but a bit of a time recovering, as I think will our Vice President Pence.
I keep thinking back to Mitchell. Remember Mitchell? He was involved in the committee to re-elect. He was up to his arms in it. We keep forgetting, and this is actually in fairness to the president, but also I think a criticism of the how transparently partisan Barr is. He's not the first person to kind of work for the president. Bobby Kennedy was the president's brother.
No, absolutely, and I think that's an excellent point. And these things are not the first. I think we live in such a time when, and it's true for human beings, we think everything, it's the first time it's happened, it's the worst, it's the most egregious. And you look back in American history, or certainly the histories of other countries, and you realize, that these things happen in different ways over and over again. And that's why it's so important to sort of step away from the immediate people and the immediate issue when we get a breath, and look at what's causing these larger structural problems that can indeed be changed.
Professor, I know you have to run. You've got baking to get back to in the kitchen. I want to thank...
I am making a dinner for you, Bob Marrone. You are going to... It's going to be for Halloween.
I'm sorry. I apologize if I said anything. Please don't. Oh, the humanity. Professor Jeannie Zaino, she is the professor of political science at Iona College, presidential historian. Thank you very much. See you on Fox soon. Take care.
Great to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. We move ahead. We were going to hear, and I think she just tried to call us, and hopefully she'll try to call us again. We got a call a little earlier from Denise Ward, and I'm going to try and call her back because we don't want to lose. Again, she called at 7:51. I'm the one running late here, but they don't know that we have the ability to call them back. You're listening to Radio Westchester. Oh, I hit the wrong button here. This is coming to you live, not on film. How many of you are Honeymooner fans anyway? I haven't played any cuts from them. Those I can play. Music, famous music, I can't play because, well, why can't you, Bob? I'll explain that later. Let's see. No, I keep dialing it wrong because I'm talking at the same time. All righty. Oh, this is easy. Look at these numbers. It is 57 degrees, I want to add, and it's getting up to 62, but rain is the order of the day. Now, let me see that I got this right. Yes, I did. We're calling now. I do believe that. They're calling us. All right, we will do that. No, we didn't get it yet. Did we miss the call again? We missed it again. We're trying to call each other. Denise Ward, I know you're trying to reach us, and we as well are trying to reach you. So give us a call back. Let's take a quick look at the weather while we wait for her to call. You can call us again, Denise, at 914-222-3141. 914-222-3141. And the weather, as it is each segment, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle. There is our guest. Let's just answer it, and we'll get right back to the weather in a moment. Actually, we'll get back to Denise Ward in just a moment. Again, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And it is 57 degrees, getting up today to 62. We'll have rain today. We'll also have rain off and on throughout tonight, and then into tomorrow, and indeed even into Friday. All righty, we're getting to our guest, Denise Ward. Thanks for calling back.
No problem, no problem. Although there was a problem trying to figure out how I was trying to get through. He kept saying a Google search. I was like, who am I talking to?
No, you.
Anyway, okay. Well, what I was saying was that, the development commissioner is a very talented man. He is. But he does have a history of a temper, and he has a history of not treating subordinates quite fairly.
I have heard this. I'm aware of that. Continue. Say more about that. You mentioned earlier, but when we had to rearrange you for Sarah Langlois, that he had a reputation for being dismissive to subordinates, not just in the city.
Yes, he does. Yeah, not just certainly not in New Rochelle. It's a reputation that preceded him. There's an article about when he was at HPD and he was dismissed. He was dismissed when a new head came in, and he was dismissed because of the way he behaved. The article wasn't about him, but he was certainly mentioned in the first 3 paragraphs as having a bad temper and not treating employees well. And there were also a number of lawsuits in which he was named. He was not the primary person, but he was named. A number of lawsuits that the city HPD was terminated. He also didn't have a great reputation in Sullivan County. So
I've seen those, and in full disclosure, right. I've seen those newspaper stories. I know that he is not user-friendly. I've had my run-ins with him that are now famous.
He's not, and that's fine. I respect that he's a very bright man, but there's a way to treat people. He also has a way of treating people to the extent that they leave. When people like you reach out to me, and I heard well before this ever happened about why they left their jobs with the city because of the way he treated them.
What do you think the city ought to do about it, if anything? Did they wait and see how the trial turns out and the lawsuit turns out? Do they give, not a mulligan, but do they say, you made a mistake, don't do it again, or you're out? Or are you one of those people who think he should be let go?
I don't think he should be let go. But
but at least
look, I happen to know the way the system works, and I know what the gentleman's accusations were and what those charges are, and I know, who the people in the administration know and who they don't. And I can understand why those charges are what they are, but I don't think they match what occurred. But that's me.
But you're a lawyer. No,
I can't answer that question, because the fact of the matter is that lots of people get convicted in the area of public, the public realm. Ray Rice was convicted well before he ever issued any kind of apology.
Very true.
And the man lost his career. Do I want Mr. Aragon to lose his career? No, but I also don't, believe the defense he propped up either. So.
Well, okay, so here's what we're dealing with, and I think I can paint a picture. We're dealing with a guy with a reputation of being dismissive to people, for lack of a better word, of a lower caste. Ergo, some feel that this is consistent with previous behavior. But the thing where the Rubicon got crossed was physically tossing the guy out of the elevator.
No question about it. I mean, he could have stood there and yelled at him, and that would have been harassment, no question. But when you put his hands on him, it's a whole different level.
Well, Richard St. Paul famously said, and we both know Richard pretty well, he said that he should be fired. I thought that was a leap for Richard. But again, I give lawyers in these civil cases wide latitude, because they can invent just about anything to make a point in court.
I can assure you that in the private sector, if he was anyone else, let's go with this. If he was anyone other than the development commissioner, he certainly would be suspended right now.
That could happen, I would think.
Yeah, I would think. And if it was in the private sector, he'd be let go. If it was a business that this was reflecting upon, if it was someone that was prominent in a business, he'd have to step down. People step down from positions for a lot of reasons where the reputation of their employer is possibly being tarnished because of bad behavior that occurs outside. You and I both know that.
Well, two things. I did want to ask you about something else since I had you, and we've got a minute or two left before my next guest comes. Again, our caller, also a frequent guest talk show host in her own right, at another station here in town, and she's good. You should listen to her. Denise.
Thank you.
Denise, I don't know if you heard Sarah Langlois, but
I did.
She took a relatively simple issue, but it was so stark. I mentioned it to Jeannie Zaino, which is
Brilliant.
Our system. We have the budget coming out. We have to judge the meal before we get to taste it.
Absolutely. That is absolutely accurate, and it's one of the things that, since been working with Sarah, who's, Republican and running on the Republican line, but she's actually, I think, I'm sure she is a registered independent.
Yes.
She needs a Wilson Pakula.
Mm-hmm.
She asked me that months ago. Well, when am I going to see the new budget? I said, it should be coming out soon. Not really paying attention. But, finally, about 15 days ago, she said, I'm going to contact them. Why can't I see this budget? And the answer was, no, we don't do that. Well, they don't do it to the people who aren't on the inside. Do we really think that the city council members haven't seen something? Don't have some idea of what's coming down the pike?
Well, I think they have. I think they've heard rumblings, and we're all hearing rumblings about some new fees coming for outflows.
Absolutely.
And
of course they are.
I've been trying to dig into that.
Yeah, of course they are. Look, you and I have discussed development, ad nauseum. I am not anti-development. I'm anti the way development is being done in this city on the backs of the existing taxpayers. That's not right. If we are such a hot city where we are making magazine covers as being the hot place to be developing, why do we need to give 30-year tax abatements? We're that hot.
Well,
and Sarah made another good point, which was the commercial. Okay, and you've said this, and I agree with you. If they build it, they will come. Well, build those offices, guys. Build the offices. Let's see if they come.
Hey, listen, thank you very much for calling in. I really appreciate it. Continued success in your practice as a lawyer and as a talk show host. Thank you so much. Take care. Denise Ward, everybody. We move straight ahead. We expect to hear from a very special guest in a moment or two. He is, and I have his paperwork right here, Mondaire Jones. And he is running. He's the guy. In case you just got off the pickle boat, he is the guy who challenged Nita Lowey in a primary, and after which she decided it was time to go. Now, to be honest, I kind of believe the people that tell me that he that she was ready to go anyway. But I don't think she's been primaried in quite some time. So it does raise the question of being primaried. Now, before he comes on, we got to get Jake in here because he doesn't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, and he probably watched the World Series. I watched a couple of innings, but I was here, Jake, till the wee hours. I was here till about 10 o'clock anyway, so in the office.
So you missed the controversy?
Yeah, what was the controversy? I saw just before when it was tied 2-2.
Well, was it tied 2-2? I think it was 3-2.
No, that's later on.
Yeah.
It was after,
It was 3-2, and the Nats had a runner on first, and Turner hit a slow roller to in between third base and the pitcher. Pitcher got the ball.
And Turner plays for who?
The Nats.
Okay.
And Turner's making a straight. He's not out of the baseline at all. His feet are in the dirt. His left foot, grazed a little bit of the grass, a little bit. But the pitcher threw it, and it hit Turner, and the pitcher's bad throw drew the first baseman's glove into Turner. Turner hit the first baseman's glove, knocked the glove off. The ball went this way, the glove went this way. Turner's on second. The other runner's on third. Second and third, no out. Decides to call it runner interference.
Really?
So
to me, the guy
Turner's
shouldn't have
out.
his glove there.
Turner's out. Runner has to go back to first base. 1 out. All hell breaks loose.
What are the assertions, and what was your conclusion? We want Jake Schaefer's conclusion.
Well, I don't know the letter of the law. I don't know the rule exactly. It seems like it's a really...
Well, the runner's supposed to make every effort to get out of the way.
And Turner was running straight down the line. He was in no way was he zigging and zagging to try and get hit. The pitcher made a bad throw, drew the first baseman's glove into Turner, but he was called out. There's a long... it's a rule that cannot be replayed, but for some reasons the umps took 10 minutes to replay the call for something that it can't be replayed. So
why couldn't it be replayed?
It's just one of those rules where it can't be replayed, but for some reason they spent 10 minutes replaying it for
looking at it anyway.
Yeah.
What's your take?
It should have been second and third, no out. So
but didn't it become moot later on though?
Yeah,
because
so then the next hitter comes up
and hits a home run.
So that's fine. But in between innings, the Nats manager goes absolutely
Gaboikius.
crazy. And he had a heart procedure a couple months ago.
I'm sorry.
And
what's wrong with me, Jake?
Oh my God!
What's wrong with
It was so crazy. My wife was even watching. It was 11:30 at night, and my wife was fascinated by it. And my wife was like, "You know what? He's going to drop dead, and he deserves it." It took two. I really thought he was going to take a swing at the umpire. It took two guys to hold this guy back, and I guess it was in the middle of the seventh inning stretch. So you couldn't hear the seventh inning stretch because this guy was just cursing and screaming. So they had to turn off all the microphones.
Really?
Yeah.
Did he get thrown out?
Oh, yeah.
They had to throw him.
Oh, I thought for sure he was going to deck the umpire.
Somebody should have came out with a shot.
Oh, my God.
And anesthetize the guy.
But thank God we got a Game 7 tonight.
Here we go.
That's all I was hoping for.
To stay up late.
I just wanted a Game 7.
So tell me, what happened to my boy Justin? And I finally saw 3 innings. And I all this time, I've never actually gotten a chance to see Strasburg.
Oh man!
Two things
great.
come to. Well, he's not overpowering. I thought he was supposed to be overpowering, but he's very smart.
Oh yeah.
He mixes his curveball and his fastball and location.
Yeah,
that one inning where he walked two guys in a row. He didn't throw a strike for 7 pitches.
Yeah.
And
he struggled a little bit in the beginning, but he was fantastic. He came out for the 9th, got 1 out in the 9th.
He's not. This is totally wrong, but I have to go there. I would never have said this on my last station. He's not going to be in GQ though. What a scary looking dude! I thought he was wearing his Halloween mask. After seeing Verlander, handsome guy.
Yeah, I appreciate
he even has a weird body.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's built. He's built like a bug.
Yeah. I mean, he's got those long arms.
Yeah, he looks like Mark Fidrich. I don't know if you remember Mark Fidrich.
Birdman.
The Birdman. He looks like the Birdman. The beard. His eyes are wrinkled like he's 50.
I know.
I mean, the guy looks 50 years old. But boy, could he pitch, and that's what I love. And I just love the way he mixed his pitches. He only throws like 94.
Yeah.
Do you remember when he first came up? He was so highly regarded. He was so highly regarded that, my guest is here. Excellent. He is so highly regarded that he that when he pitched in the minors, they sold out the whole.
Oh, yeah,
I
he
guess it
pitched-
was the Louisville Redbirds, one of those.
No,
places.
he pitched in Syracuse.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. The Syracuse Chiefs.
Big news.
He always brings it back. Our guest is here, Mr. Jones. But you always bring it back to Syracuse, where you grew up. They have a city there.
They do.
They do. Yeah. All right.
Still standing.
All right, we'll be back with Jake Schaefer a little later in the broadcast. Right now, we go to Mondaire Jones. Now, I've been saying, thank you for coming in, Mr. Jones. Take a seat, and I will get my my stuff out here. And I am so glad he made it in to see us in person, in the flesh. And as you can see, welcome to our humble abode.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
If you get just a little closer to the mic. Now, I've been kidding about it all morning and teasing you coming on, but the fact of the matter is this. Before you decided to champion your cause and to primary Nita Lowy, as far as we all knew, she was still running. What's your take on this?
That was the conventional wisdom.
It was.
And I don't think anyone can doubt that I am committed to progressive values, big solutions for the big problems that we have in this district and all throughout the country. Because there is no better controlled experiment than what we saw last summer. I like to say that I went into the lion's den. And by the way, I have tremendous respect for our member of Congress. She's
done a fine job for 30 years.
Absolutely, she has. She inspires me. She has made it easier for someone like myself to run for office now and expand upon her legacy. But having said that, there were a number of reasons why I decided to run.
Okay, let's get to that. First, let's tell us a little bit about you. Your publicist or your aide sent us some information. I know where'd you grow up?
I was born at Nyack Hospital and grew up in a small working class community called the Village of Spring Valley. It's right across the Hudson River.
I know where it is.
Rochelle.
Sure.
And I attended East Ramapo Public Schools my entire childhood.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And they were a lot in the news there a couple of years ago, boy, and with the school board and everything else. Did any of that inspire you to be political? Some of the stuff you read about that?
You know, it's interesting you asked that because the answer is yes. When
I would think so.
when
Get
I
a
was
little closer to the
freshman
mic.
At Spring Valley High School, I saw how difficult it was to pass a school budget on an annual basis, which
Yes.
is something that most school districts just take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to myself, I've got to do something about this. I've got to organize my fellow students. And I reactivated what was a defunct Spring Valley NAACP Youth Council, and we built membership, and we got out the vote, and we registered voters. And
That was you.
in coordination.
All right, because I was covering news at another station then. Okay.
In coordination with people out in the community who were adults at the time,
Uh-huh.
together we worked to get the school budget passed.
And then you ran into all those issues where some money wasn't going to the public school and money was going to yeshivas and everything else. That had to be a difficult horse to climb up on.
You know, I graduated in 2005, which is right before the private school community obtained.
Mr. Jones, that makes you young. I hate you now, and now I'm prejudiced against his youth, folks. So good for you. So go ahead, continue, sir.
It was largely before some of the issues that you've been reading about in the papers.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I'm running to represent the entire district, and that means that sometimes you got to have difficult conversations with people you disagree with, and so that means if somebody doesn't think that X number of dollars should be going to public schools, and you got to sit down and you have to talk about why it's important to fund public education and why that impacts literally everybody, even if you don't send your kids to public schools. And that's the kind of leadership that I hope to bring to Congress if elected.
Well, a little bit about your background. I mean, I got some notes. You've been a busy guy for someone who graduated in 2005. You went to Stanford undergrad. You worked for the Department of Justice in the Obama administration. He went to Harvard. I think I served coffee in Harvard once, and most recently was a litigator with the Westchester County Law Department. You've done a lot of stuff. What are you doing right now?
I am working hard to convince people that I am by far the best choice in this Democratic primary to represent them in Congress. I think we need to be sending a fighter to Washington. For me, policy is personal, and that's why I'm running. I was raised by a single mom who worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet, even with the help of a Section 8 housing voucher and food stamps. So
No
I know what
kidding.
it's like to struggle. And my mother, she got help from my grandparents. My grandfather was a janitor, and later he was a small business owner. And my grandmother, she cleaned homes. And so now I'm running to represent the same people whose homes I watched my grandmother clean when daycare was too expensive and she took me with her to work. That is the quintessential American story. It is the kind of leadership and perspective that I think is sorely missing in Washington. And it's the kind of message that I'm trying to convey every day. I'm working really hard to do that.
My guest is Mondaire Jones, and I pronounced it correctly, did I not? Mondaire Jones. He is running for the 17th Congressional District in the primary against Nita Lowey, who has decided to retire. And we'll probably never know whether or not she was going to retire anyway. But this is the man you've read about in the newspapers who challenged, who said he would challenge in a primary the long-term Congresswoman. And now here he is. And just, you went to Stanford. Why Stanford? And were you prepared to, is being a lawyer what you wanted to do?
You know, I didn't know. It seems like my friends knew before I did that I would go to law school. They said, you're so politically active in college. I was fighting for things like a living wage for dining hall and maintenance workers and faculty and graduate student
Do
diversity.
you think you could help out radio talk show hosts while you're at it when you become a congressman?
Listen,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I hope to represent everybody in the district and fight for everybody in the district. I know New Rochelle is in Elliott English district for the time being, but who knows what will happen with redistricting.
Well, no, it doesn't matter because this is a Westchester Westchester station, and of course the district that you run in is parts of Westchester and much of course Rockland
All of
and
Rockland, yeah.
some Putnam.
No,
And
all of
just
the
Rockland.
district is
Okay.
all of Rockland County and parts of central and northern Westchester.
Oh no,
County.
we definitely want you here. Nita Lowey was, as you know, our congresswoman here
Yes.
as well before they redistricted. So now when you went to Harvard Law, were you then saying to yourself, you know what? I think I want to go into politics. Was it in you yet, or was the law in you?
By the time I was at Harvard Law School, I was very interested in politics. I had already served in the Obama administration in the early years. I'm really proud of the work.
What was
we
that
did.
like?
It was.
I'm a political wonk, as you probably can tell. I'm all excited now. What was that like to work in the White House?
You can't replicate it.
No,
I
huh?
was a 22-year-old pipsqueak who had just graduated college.
You know, if you weren't so likable, I'd hate you already, but go ahead.
And I was deeply committed, like so many of my colleagues, many of whom were young and were just as young as I was, to the things that we said we believed in as a Democratic Party, and also to things that transcend party affiliation, right? I mean, the idea that every American should have economic security, that every American should be treated equally under the law. These are things, unfortunately, that the current presidential administration does not seem to care about, and certainly not his Attorney General.
Now, Mondaire, it's so whenever I talk to political candidates, I'm always addressing them by their title, and I want to be respectful. Since you don't have one yet, Counselor, it'll be Mr. Jones or Mondaire. I hope you don't mind that.
No, please call me Mondaire.
But you've seen what it's like. You've been at the White House when that president went through what he went through, Barack Obama.
And just to be clear, I was at the Department of Justice.
No, the
at
DOJ,
Obama.
but nonetheless, you served during that administration. You see, in forgetting the politics of it, what it's like for the current administration. You've lived in one of the most politically interesting regions up in East Ramapo in the last decade. This is usually the first question I ask. Well, you were such a fresh face, I wanted to get to know you first. And I've got to ask you what I've asked from presidential candidates to dog catcher. Why do you want to do this to yourself?
Like I have always felt like I had to pay it forward. I've been so lucky to have been helped along the way by a strong community, in particular in Rockland County.
Really?
But who just sort of came together and said, you're going to be a success story. You're not going to be like so many other people who are no less talented than you, but who, for reasons outside of their control, weren't able to make it as far as I was able to make it. I've never felt like I was the reason why I am here today. Sure, it requires hard work, and I'm really good at that. I'm the hardest working person you'll probably ever
I'm
meet.
looking at your record here. I'm not even going to ask
you
your
left
age.
out some things. I co-founded a nonprofit that.
Well, no, we'll get to all that, but I want to. We're going to get to that. Trust me. But we got to the basics. They did you a brief. I asked for a brief bio, and they gave it to me. It doesn't say anything about the nonprofit. Or I just missed it. You worked in the DOJ. You went to Harvard, Westchester County Law Department, fighter in Congress, healthcare, climate change, civil rights. Got it. It didn't say anything about the nonprofit, but we'll get to it. The question is, what would you like to see changed? What is your vision? As a member of Congress, of course, in the beginning, you're a backbencher, but still, what do you want to accomplish?
I'll push back on that. I don't expect to be a backbencher as a freshman member of Congress. I think we've seen already that as a freshman member of Congress, you can make sure that the entire country is talking about things like a Green New Deal.
Oh, like AOC. And now there are people listening who are going to want to know, are you going to completely, or is it conceivable, is a more fair way to put it, is it conceivable that you will align yourself with what people are now referring to as the hard left, AOC, and even perhaps to some extent Elizabeth Warren?
I believe in big solutions for the big problems that we have. And to me, that's not about joining a particular faction that may exist within the Democratic Conference. It is about fighting alongside anyone and everyone who agrees with me on these transformational changes that we need in our society. So I just don't think of it like that. I happen to have great admiration for many of the freshman members of Congress, including AOC. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with every single thing that the person does, but you cannot doubt the sincerity of in particular, many of the women who are freshman members of Congress, who are deeply committed to making sure that everybody has a fair shake in this broken economy.
Speaking of women, before we get into a little more policy, and I want to hear about the nonprofit you started, what does your mother do?
My mother currently is disabled, and so she's not working.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
well, because I have to tell you, I'm meeting you, and you said you had a single mom. She must be bursting at the seams, proud of you, and she must be a special woman. I have to conclude that. You'll forgive me.
She's extraordinary, and I just would not be here were it not for her.
Any hope for her getting better, or she just has stuff she has to deal with? I won't pry into her private life.
No. Please, I think it's really important to share my story. I remain ever hopeful that because mental illness is just debilitating.
Trust me.
For a lot of people in this country, and that's personal for me too. And we do not provide enough resources for people struggling with that, and we
not at all.
And there's just this stigma that just really shouldn't exist, because we all know people in our family and our friendship circles who are struggling with that. And it's not something that anyone should be ashamed of, but it can be really debilitating. And in this case, it can prevent someone from really participating in the workforce in a meaningful way.
Okay, I'm going to get personal for a moment. God bless your mom. Yeah. These things are tough. I not famously, it's not published yet. I put it in a newspaper. I wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
And I've been a sufferer.
Yeah.
30 years ago, and I have nothing. I respected your mom when you walked in here. Now I respect her twice over. Godspeed with her, and we'll get back to you now. But I just had to ask you that because you just didn't get up one day and decide to be you. You had help along the way.
I did have help along the way.
Mondaire Jones is our guest. He is the first challenger to Nita Lowey's seat. He is the individual who, when he decided to primary her, either sped up or concluded her decision to move on after 30 plus good years in the Congress of the United States. We're talking about the 17th District. Again, Mondaire Jones. We know that he grew up in Nyack, in Spring Valley, East Ramapo School System, went to Stanford, Harvard Law, works, I guess now, are you with the county law department right now?
I actually,
or did you take a leave?
The job that I love to run full-time for Congress.
Oh, good. God bless you. Okay. You mentioned a nonprofit before. Tell me about it.
A few friends and I from college got together and co-founded a nonprofit called Rising Leaders. And we provide mentorship and teach professional skills to underserved middle school students in Harlem, in Washington, D.C., and Seattle. And I'm really proud to say that we recently got our second grant from the Gates Foundation about a month or so ago. And so we do a workshop a month in these schools throughout the academic calendar, and you can just sort of see the transformation. I mean, these are soft skills that oftentimes aren't come by in traditional
absolutely structure. Mr. Jones, we have a new superintendent of schools. In fact, she'll hear New Rochelle. She'll take office on Friday, and we interviewed her for an hour about a month ago. And she mentioned middle school being perhaps the most important gateway to everything else, because if it's not done right, high school doesn't work, college doesn't work. Was this one of the things that motivated you? Why did you pick middle school?
It absolutely did. I think many people who are more expert than I am on this subject would tell you that while there's still hope in high school for people who may not have been given the resources that they need to thrive, middle school is ground zero for that kind of development.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do an intervention in middle school, then it completely changes your trajectory. In high school, for example, imagine not really knowing how to thrive in high school, and then all of a sudden all of this stuff is counting as part of your application to college, and so automatically you're off to a disadvantaged start as college admissions offices are looking at your grade point average, for example, the kinds of classes that you took, the kinds of extracurricular activities that you're involved in. So it's really important to lay that foundation in middle school.
Folks, he's asking me about my GPA, and I'm looking around and I'm giving, I'm averting glances.
I can barely remember mine.
Mondaire Jones is our guest. He's running for the 17th Congressional District here, all of Rockland, parts of Westchester. As you know, Nita Lowy it will be stepping down after 30-plus successful years in the Congress. He is the first person to step forward. Now, internecine battles in your own party, they're always tough. Are you the kind of guy that will be able, and I realize it's a leading question, but I need to ask it anyway.
I'm liking the way it's shaping up already.
No,
Go ahead.
Are you going to be able to work with the men and women that you will have run against if you get the job?
Absolutely, I will. Absolutely, I will. I have great respect for all of my colleagues in the Democratic primary, and I expect it to get even.
Oh, it's going to get bigger.
Even more crowded. Because everybody, or many people, I should say, have been waiting a long time for this seat.
Oh, they have.
And I've got to tell you, I didn't expect at the age of 32 to be running for United States
I didn't ask your
Congress.
age. You're 32. Now I have 3 reasons to hate you. Get out of here. 32. Go ahead. Well, actually, that's a good age.
But for me, I think so too. I think we need more young people in office, and that is not a slight to any. My grandmother gets that. My grandmother loves what I'm doing. She encourages me every day to keep fighting.
Good for her.
Because she understands that I am part of a generation that stands to inherit a planet, for example, that is going to be devastated by climate change if we don't act with the urgency that we need.
There are going to be a lot less cities on the coasts when you have children, sir. I got a question for you that you're... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would just also say I am part of a generation where... almost everyone I know who still lives in this district, who's my age or younger, despite having college degrees, are still living at home with their parents. And that is because we were sold a bill of goods that if we just went to college, everything would work out for us. And that's not true. And largely that's due to a student debt crisis to the tune of $1.6 trillion at the college debt level.
It is criminal. The financial services firms are equally guilty, because there ought to be a way to repackage that debt and make it easier for people to pay minimally.
I agree. And so we've got to liberate an entire generation of people, my generation, to meaningfully participate in this economy. How do you expect people to pay rent or buy their own homes, which is the single biggest generator of wealth in this country, if people who are graduating college with $40,000 in debt are making starting salary $30,000 and $40,000?
Now, Mondaire Jones, there are people, and once again, he is running for the 17th district seat in the primary, the first person to step forward in primary, Nita Lowy, and we are lucky to have him here today. If I were running against you, and I wouldn't want to, which the best thing I can say about you, is I would say, well, geez, he just said he's only 32. He's got the degrees. He's great. He's up and coming. Why doesn't he run for the assembly? Why doesn't he run for the state senate? Why doesn't he run for town supervisor in East Ramapo? Why is he in our hair? What would be your answer to them?
Because I'm tremendously qualified for the role of Congress. And I will note that someone for whom I have great respect, Congresswoman Lowy, had never held elected office before she was elected to Congress, and she's been extraordinary, even as, obviously, I've disagreed with her in some areas. And so I think that we need more bartenders in Congress. I think we need...
Bartenders?
I think of people minimize AOC, but guess what? we wouldn't be talking about the Green New Deal were it not for her, right? And because the people say, well, she's a bartender. Well, she was a bartender, so she's not qualified. And again, I'm not saying that I agree with everything AOC does, okay? I don't. But I just use that as an example.
Well, she's a firebrand.
It's low-hanging fruit.
And plus, a bartender's a good deal in Congress, my right, Reverend friend. Eek. Anyway, go ahead.
We need people who understand what it's like to be an everyday person.
Mm-hmm.
Not someone who's qualified simply by virtue of having served in the assembly or the state senate. My goodness, I'm running against someone now, who my state senator, who spent 8 of the last 9 years caucusing with Republicans, and that is State Senator David Carlucci. And so
you're talking about David Carlucci, yes.
As a member of the IDC.
Yes, he was.
So-called IDC. So just because you serve in the state senate doesn't qualify you, and just because you don't serve in the state senate doesn't mean you're not qualified.
So you knew about. See, you do have your fingers in the local politics. You knew he was part of the IDC. In fact, he's one of
part
those
of the movement.
Yes. Oh, I know that.
I
I know that movement very well, and I had been very critical of the guy who headed it up down in the Bronx, and who finally got his just desserts for it. But Mr. Carlucci escaped that bullet. A lot of the people who were members of the ICD did not. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that.
He narrowly survived his primary challenge.
Well, because of that, that's correct. And you could have run for that, by the way. Again, there are those who say, well, then why didn't you primary Carlucci instead of Nita?
There are plenty of people who say you would have won that seat, and now you wouldn't have to deal with a member of the IDC in the Democratic primary if you had just done.
But we know how you're going to be dealing with him when it comes to the debates, et cetera. You mentioned that there were things that Nita Lowy has espoused that you didn't agree with, and I'm sure you've already met with her. I'm sure you know her. Do you know her well? Have you gotten to meet her?
I don't know Congresswoman Lowy well. I would just say, again, I have tremendous respect for her, and it's an open seat now, and so I'm really excited to be running for this open seat, and I don't view it as a primary because it's not anymore of Nita Lowy. It's a primary, and frankly, I never really thought of it as a primary against Congresswoman Lowy. I wanted us to be in support of impeachment, and I was happy to see that a week after I entered the race, Congresswoman Lowy came out in support of impeachment.
Well, some people came out slowly. Now, we had on shortly before you came in
there were
political
other things
science.
too.
Pardon?
And there were other areas too.
Okay, well, I had a couple other questions I want to ask you about. Earlier today, we spoke with a political scientist, and we got into the nitty-gritty about impeachment. And as you know, and especially as a lawyer, Harvard trained, we're in an area of the law with respect to impeachment where this particular situation may well set precedent. In other words, there is no real law, there's no code, there are no so-called statutes that govern what is a high crime and misdemeanor. It is what ultimately, in this case, the Republican Senate will say it is after charges, assuming charges are brought. Do you think he should be removed from office, or do you think that we should let it play out and let the precedent be set one way or another?
I think that in a civilized society, this president would have already been removed through the impeachment process.
For what reasons?
Oh my goodness, for voluminous reasons. Most recently, treason, trying to get a foreign government to investigate a political adversary, after literally calling on another foreign government to do the same thing. At the time he was running for president, he was not yet the president. I mean, but his embrace of white supremacy, his assault on members of the LGBTQ community, of which I'm a part, the violation constantly of the emoluments clause in the United States Constitution, which is something that isn't given enough a thought.
Well, actually, I'm glad you couldn't have said that. I mean, it's not about me, but I've been ranting about that for 2 years, that I don't think half the lawyers in the country understand it, or at least don't want to get into it. Continue.
Yeah, and so the public record is just replete. Okay, let's go, by the way, to the Mueller investigation, the Mueller report. You have someone who has violated repeatedly the law in the form of obstruction of justice. And by the way, attempting to obstruct justice is also an independent crime. And so the record is just replete with any number of independent grounds to impeach this president and to convict him in the Senate, because it is a two-pronged procedure, as you know. And it is devastating, I think, to the Constitution and to a society that Republicans in the Senate appear not ready or willing to even entertain.
Got a question apropos of this. Again, Mondaire Jones is our guest. He is running in the primary, will be running in the primary. He's the original person who primaried Nita Lowey for the 17th Congressional District here in Rockland, Westchester counties. We have an interesting, I don't think it's a paradox, but some people do. They say, well, if we impeach Trump, we have Pence. And what I've always said, and it's just by way of juxtaposition for you, is I'd rather have a person I disagree with on 15 counts who doesn't break the law than a person I agree with who does. Where do you stand on that?
So there are a number of reasons why, and I wrote an op-ed about this actually.
I'm not surprised.
Before the impeachment inquiry was actually underway, and I was the first person out on that. In the Democratic primary, as I like to say, I'm the first person in the Democratic primary, regardless of who's in it and who was in it. To call for the impeachment of this president. If we don't impeach this president, we send a signal to all future presidents that they are above the law. That, in and of itself, is sufficient justification. We cannot set a precedent where someone routinely flouts the law, flagrantly flouts the law, and is just able to escape unscathed by, and this the one procedure we have. We know that because of this Office of Legal Counsel opinion, we can't formally indict this president so long as he remains the president. So what we have to do is use the one procedure available to us, and that is impeachment under the United States Constitution.
Which Mueller left open. Did he disappoint you
Yes.
by the ambiguity and the obtuseness of his language?
He did. I have great respect for former FBI Director Bob Mueller, but I've got to tell you, I think he really dropped the ball when it came to making recommendations.
Well, I thought he had a chance to be part of history, and he abdicated.
He could have at least made a formal conclusion on the issue, a definitive conclusion on the issue of obstruction of justice. It shouldn't be that we have to read between the lines and say, well, yeah, obviously.
Or even use the words. He could have said that's what impeachment's for, and he said there are, it reminded me of, when I was an executive before, a communications executive before I came to radio, and we would have people who, if we had a problem or something needed to be written off, they would bring me the whole story and they'd hand it to me and say, here, see. And I'd say, I want your conclusion. I want to know that you understand what it is you just concluded doing. He did what these timid employees did, and I'm so disappointed. You share that?
I do, and I do, and it's really disappointing. I'll be honest with you, I think it comes from a place of privilege. For me, everything this president does is personal because I'm not receiving equal treatment under the law, for example. By the way, I would be the first openly gay African American member of Congress in United States history. Under our current employment law, I can be fired because of my sexual orientation. So for me, there is an urgency to getting this guy out of office. And I've got to tell you, people talk about Mike Pence. Well, I don't think Mike Pence is going to be coordinating with foreign governments. And don't you care about what happens in the 2020 election to make sure that we actually have an electoral process that has integrity? And so I'm comfortable with the result that for a few months, Mike Pence will be the president of the United States.
Isn't it interesting, by the way, you mentioned that you're being openly gay and obviously an African American. One of the most qualified people running right now, I think he's a little young, but that's maybe because I'm ancient. But if he were, my favorite candidate in the race is Buttigieg, by the way. I'm a little bit reluctant because of all the wisdom that job needs to elect someone president who's the mayor of a smaller town. But do you think your profile, the fact that you're gay and black, how much do you think that'll hold you back? Not necessarily in this race, but if you want to go further, what are you hopeful for?
I think that this campaign represents the future of the Democratic Party, and I'm already so excited to see other people recognize that all throughout the district. I think we are the inspiring campaign. We are the campaign that people can relate to and that they want to root for. And we are the campaign that is making magic happen. Who would have thought that on July 8th of 2019, which is when I announced my primary entry, that we would be finding ourselves in this situation now of running for an open seat and seeking to make history as we seek to fight for the people of the 17th Congressional District.
Mondale, two things before you go. One, and I want to be sure this is, when I say this is real, you seem very comfortable in your own skin.
Thank you.
Who you are, what you stand for. Has it always been thus?
It hasn't always been that way. I mean, I've always been sort of confident in my abilities. What I've not been so confident about, especially growing up, is the way I would be received. And so that's why it's so important. That's why people say representation matters. Growing up, as someone who was struggling with who he was,
I bet.
If I had the example of someone like myself running for United States Congress and being a qualified candidate and being a good candidate, that would have helped me see myself in the future and come to the conclusion that there was a place for me in this society, and there's a place for me to give back to my community and be respected.
Mondale, before you go, first of all, we'd like to keep you in as some sort of a regular guest. We'll talk with, I guess it's Talia, and make the arrangements. We want you to be heard throughout this year leading up to
I would love that.
Your campaign. We'd love to have you on. Number one, before you go, what are the next steps? What can people expect from Mondale Jones over these many months to the primary?
Well, until we have a system of public financing in this country, fundraising, unfortunately, is a significant aspect of that. The primary is June 23rd, but it will be here before you know it.
Yeah, will be.
I'm the only candidate in this race, shockingly, that has declined to accept money from corporate PACs. I don't want anyone to ever have to
You're not
question.
taking any. You got a lot of work to do raising money, Congressman.
But guess what?
To be a congressman.
We raised $250,000 last summer.
Wow.
When many people thought that we didn't even have a
Well,
chance.
one of the things we'll be talking about over these next few months is the fact that every congressman we've spoken to, or even people in local elections every other year, they spend 1 year raising money and another year trying to govern. Listen, we have to go,
Okay,
but
can
we
I-
wish you. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
I would just say, for folks who want to find out more about me or make a contribution, they can go to mondareforcongress.com. That's MONDAIRE forcongress.com.
And folks, we don't want to talk. Don't anyone call in and ask me about my GPA when I was in school. Mondale Jones, he's running for the 17th Congressional District. He was the man who primaried Nita Lowey. She is now retiring. So far, we've heard a couple of names out there. We know that Mr. Carlucci, Senator Carlucci, will probably run. Tom Abenante has maybe put his hat in the ring. There have been rumors about, of course, Amy Paulin, and everybody on the planet knows that one day, although he says he said on this program he's not going to run, Mayor Noam Bramson here in New Rochelle, as often he worked for Nita. But the man that started it all is with us and leaving now, Mondale Jones. Check out his website. He's running for the 17th Congressional District in Rockland and Westchester counties. Thanks very much for being with us, sir.
Thanks
We really
for having
appreciate it.
me.
We're going to take a break, and we will be back with Al Tarantino. This is Radio Westchester. taking a breather here. It is 8:39. We're reaching out to Al Tarantino now. He'll be with us directly, then Ivar Hayden, and then we'll talk to Harlan Ullman. We have returned. This is Radio Westchester. Welcome back once again. It is 8:40 now. We kind of pulled an audio at the line of scrimmage. We moved Al Tarantino late yesterday, and we may have inadvertently bumped him out of his available time spot. But if that's the case, we'll get him back tomorrow. That was very interesting. And again, we let him say his piece. We have here now in the 17th district a candidate running for office who is obviously very bright, very committed, very energized, and as he said, he could make history as the first openly gay African American in Congress if indeed he does prevail. Now he's going to be running against some formidable people. Mr. Carlucci is a very good campaigner, very well liked in his district, although that IDC thing is going to come back to haunt him, I think. And once again, this is the crappy easel that I have. Thank you, Staples. I think the person, though, for my money, that will be the biggest challenge for him if she decides to run is Amy Poehlen. Because she has, again, now we're talking within the context of Democratic left-leaning politics. She has the bona fides. She's passed the bills. But generally speaking, because she has done so well liked in her district, she has not, I would say, she has not done a lot of campaigning in the last decade. She doesn't, other than when she's working on a bill, come out to play a lot with the media. So she will have to climb that hill once again. Tom Abenante is absolutely tireless. He's also tireless as someone who is willing to face off with the governor and champion his efforts. But being a member of the assembly, well, let's see, okay. I just was checking some stuff. You'll forgive me. I just wanted to be sure that I didn't miss anything. And I did want to finish up with Jake. Jake, could you come back to your seat of pain? Because we didn't get a prediction from you about tonight. Now, we know that Zach Greinke is going to pitch. Who's he pitching against tonight?
He's pitching against Scherzer.
That's a good matchup.
Yeah, but you know what I think about Greinke.
You think he's not a big game pitcher.
He will show it tonight.
Well, I was looking at the numbers. Let me get it back out. So, let me look at the numbers here. Greinke's record. Where is it? Oh, Scherzer was only 11-7?
Yeah.
And Greinke won 18 games. You got to give Greinke the edge, no?
No.
Get on the mic. Well, okay.
But they might have Cole for an inning or two. Everyone's available. Maybe you'll see Strasburg for an out or two.
Oh, I don't know. Not after 8 innings.
It's Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah, but 8 innings. I mean, his arm's got to be wrung out, no?
You never know.
But who else is on that staff?
The Nationals?
Yeah.
They got Corbin, the lefty. He might be available. Anibal Sanchez might be available. Everyone's available except for I think I would not be surprised if you saw Strasburg.
Who's their closer?
They really are bullpen by committee.
By committee?
Yeah.
So that's tonight at 8
Two
o'clock.
very weak bullpens.
Now tell me about Scherzer. Why do you only win 11 games?
Again, you worry about the wins and losses so much.
You know, you're one of these analytics geeks. All right, but okay, fine.
Didn't have the run support. His team didn't back him up enough, just like Mr. DeGrom.
Oh, you and Mr. DeGrom. Really. Okay, fine. I'll go with it. So, make your call. Who wins tonight?
Nats.
The Nats win, huh?
All 7 games will be the winner will be a road team.
That's unprecedented, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Did you look at least check the score of the Rangers? They actually played well last night.
Oh, they did.
They beat the top team in the league 4-1. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Rangers South.
Did the infusion of young blood help out?
Actually, it did help. Heidel scored, so did Kakko Kapanen, and they had this tough, this grizzled defenseman who's actually a young kid, Lindgren, who came up, did well. But they did something last night that was unprecedented for all his years with the team, 12 years with the team. They sat Mark Stahl. But they sat him because he doesn't have a lot of shots on net, and that troubles me because I think as much as this is a go-go league and everybody goes running up and down, they need defense.
What time do the hockey games start on the East Coast? 7?
No, they start at 7 and 8 depending on the city. 7 because they like to get people home, but
And you
generally
get them
7.
in until they'll end around 9?
I mean 9:30. If it starts at 9, hockey's a little more disciplined with how much they get people out of the building. Baseball's becoming a 3-4 hour event now. Every effort they've made to speed up the game's not working.
No.
And really, it's really just a matter of changing the rules, changing the game. I mean, if a pitcher has to throw a pitch in 20 seconds, then he has to throw a pitch in 20 seconds. I don't know why they just don't do it. I think a batter ought to be able to bat. I think you give him 20 seconds in the box, and it would become habit. Now, they're experimenting with that in the independent leagues.
Yes, they are.
And they're even experimenting, I understand, next year in the Atlantic Coast League, or one of the leagues, they're going to move back the pitcher's mound,
Oh, wow.
which I don't think they should do.
I wouldn't mess with that.
Yeah.
But they are going to experiment with robot umpires, home-plate umpires.
Oh, I
which
think
would be-
I think that would work. Now, I just don't know because you got the ball going through the strike zone. You know, a lot of times like a pitch goes outside the square, but it's gone through the strike zone as a strike. So, if the technology does that, that would be pretty cool because it's judgment. And they do miss some. Although, you know what? Since they put that box up, they don't miss many.
This World Series has been pretty bad. The home plate umpires have been pretty bad.
Did you see the inning last night? It's the last one that I saw where Mr. Strasburg must have thrown eight balls in a row. And I said, I yelled out, I was having dinner. I said, for God's sake, throw a strike.
Did you see the two guys hit the home runs and they carried the one guy, the Astro Bregman, hit the home run, carried his bat and tried to give it to his first base coach, and the first base coach just didn't want to take it. So
Why?
He was just showing up Strasburg. So the Nationals guy Soto hit a home run. He carried his bat to his first base coach, and he didn't want to accept the bat either. I thought that was hilarious.
That's ridiculous that they do that. All righty, let's get our next guest. But first, we want to cover a little bit of housekeeping. Ivar Hayden, your city councilman from District 4, is in the house. He was out here this morning with a number of others. It certainly has been a very interesting morning. Let's take a quick look at the weather. And the weather today is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It's 57 degrees, headed to 62 today, drizzling off and on throughout the day. Tonight we'll average out about 60, still more rain tomorrow, more drizzle off and on. Things will begin to look a little bit better on Friday, but it'll be chillier, temperatures down around 50. Saturday, sunshine is in the forecast, and we'd love to say that Radio Westchester ordered up the sunshine, but we did not. Sunshine just walked in the studio in the person of Ivar Hayden. This morning's program is also supported by Aging Issues Management and Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Pena and Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. We'll be back in about 20 seconds with Ivar Hayden. We have returned once again. If you get up late, you're late for work, you better run out of the house. It is Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. 57 overcast, drizzling off and on, and you're listening to Radio Westchester. Can you believe that Halloween is, oh God, it's tomorrow. Who knew? This is Radio Westchester, Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. We speak now with Ivar Hayden. He is your councilman from District 4 here in New Rochelle. Following that, Harlan Ullman, and we have much to talk about. As you know, when he's on, we kind of look around the entire world and focus on individual countries and how the politics of the United States, or at least what benefits the United States and our interests, how we're faring. But first, please welcome Ivar Hayden. Good morning, Councilman. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Bob. I'm fine, thank you.
So you guys were out and about. The mayor popped in today at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, no, we were out on the train platform welcoming people on their way to work and wishing them a good day and asking for their support in the upcoming election.
Now, were the other candidates out there? Were the candidates out there too, or was it just the people already in the saddle?
No, the group that was out here this morning were people who are already on council.
Okay.
And there were also people from the opposition as well.
Yeah, well, Sarah Langlois was with us this morning.
Yep. And so that was, that's good to see. This is democracy in action.
Well, that's why we're here, and that's why it was great that she came in. The mayor popped in this morning. You are here, and just being in the train station is valuable that way. Sarah Langlois mentioned something, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. And, it's something that I knew. Do you ever have anything in life where you knew it, but its true essence didn't really kick you in the butt?
No, that has happened to me. Yes.
And I said, what's the first thing you'll do if you're elected? And this is no knock to Sarah Kay. She may agree with it, and we'll get her on as well. She said, I'd like to see the budget come out before Election Day. Mm-hmm. And I kind of went humming. I said, that's right. It's the only thing where we have to vote on the food before we sample it.
Yeah. Listen. This has been traditional. I don't know why this was originally structured.
Oh, I think
this
we
way,
know why.
But well, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it would matter a great deal, to tell you the truth, in terms of the political world. Mm-hmm. The budget is incredibly complex.
Yes.
And 160 something $million at this point.
A mere bag of shells.
It's a lot smaller than the school budget, which is well over $250 million.
Well, we had it's amazing. We had the county executive in here on Monday, came in person as well. It's political weeks. Everybody's out of the train station. Yeah. And it's amazing how people yell and scream about the budget and give the prime creators of that budget a free pass.
No, I understand what you're saying. I certainly would have no objection if the budget came out earlier. I do think the budget is, it's a tremendous amount of work to put together the city budget, obviously, and I think that I would be perfectly content if it was put out a little bit before. I honestly don't know what much difference it would make. It is such a dense document.
It is a dense document.
It's so difficult for people to understand.
No, but you take it into a recliner at home, light up a cigar, and read the.
Oh, absolutely! I think everybody would be thrilled to do that. As a matter. I mean, on the other hand, the same thing happens with the school budget, which is you vote on the budget and the candidates at the same time, the same day. So I agree. I don't think it would be a bad idea at all if we got the budget a little bit earlier. I would also personally, it's a great deal to take in.
But it would be hard to get done before it's time, though, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't have all the revenue numbers.
It would be very difficult to do. It would be difficult, but I wouldn't mind more time. I mean, we have extra meetings during the course of the budget season on City Council to go over some of the issues. There's a great deal to look at. And but it's critically important, and I understand that.
Well, I know, and into my conversations with the mayor and the county executive, right now everybody's pretty hopeful about sales tax receipts and things like that. Do you know how we're doing in New Rochelle?
No, we're doing well. It's up a little bit again. I think one of the big problems, obviously, with sales tax receipts is online sales, and I do know that some of the major online retailers like Amazon do kick in sales tax.
Well, that's good, because they should.
Yeah, they certainly should. And but I think in reality, all of us should be paying sales tax to the districts that we live in on all kinds of internet sales, not just Amazon and some of the major people, because that genuinely does hurt us. So I don't know how that's going to play out. We'll see.
Speaking of how things are going to play out, let me remind folks that voice you hear, that wonderful voice, and it's the only thing I hate him for. That wonderful voice you hear is that of Ivar Hyde, New York councilman from District 4. He's running unopposed this year. And nonetheless, he was out campaigning on the train station anyway, so he should have some votes.
It's fun to it's always fun to meet people. It genuinely is. I enjoy doing that. I don't think we are given the opportunity to do that in sufficient numbers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I do go to all the neighborhood associations in my particular district, but it's still difficult because here in the downtown, which I represent a large part of,
yes,
it's very difficult to meet people who live in these high-rises and apartment buildings. There are no neighborhood associations in the downtown, so it's difficult to reach out to people and get to know them on a one-to-one basis.
You know, as someone who represents a good chunk of the downtown, this next question I'm sure will resonate. People running on both parties, one thing they're concerned about, everybody has a different solution. Some people use it as a hammer to beat the development, other people, but everybody at the end of the day says, okay, this is fine, but what about business? We have all of the residential stuff coming in. People are saying, where's the business? Where is the retail? And my answer always is that the hope is that all the new bodies, all the new higher income entities, that the foot traffic, B, the buying power, or to create the need for office space and retail. Is that an acknowledged part of the plan, or is it just wishful thinking?
I think that is what the hope is for the long haul. I mean, we all realize fully that retail has changed totally. I mean, basically there is no more retail as we knew it because of the internet. I think that we will be seeing more restaurants, more service businesses, and there are some new kinds of businesses which I think are interesting that are developing as part of this new age culture. There's this Encore, which is this computer gaming place that opened up.
That's doing very well.
It's doing extremely well. They're mobbed all the time, and that's an interesting area that I knew absolutely nothing about. But this is something that young people are very interested in. And by the way, it's not just young people in the sense of kids who are doing this video.
Oh no, there are lots of gamers.
A lot of adults who are doing this as well. So that was interesting to me because I had not heard about that until we actually passed legislation permitting this. And it's been very successful. There will be other things like that, I think, coming down the line. WeWork spaces, that kind of thing, are growing tremendously. We have a couple already here in New Rochelle, and I think that's an area where we're going to see more and more as opposed to companies with individual offices. There'll be these shared workspaces, and I think that's an interesting component.
Shared workspaces are very popular.
The problem, mom and pops, and I have a small retail business, obviously, and we're struggling also as a result of the internet. There's no question about that. Although in my particular business, it's more hands-on, and it's custom framing is not something that you can do that
it's hard
easily
to order
online. Although you can do it now, but it's still. I think people still want to see the choices, see what their art looks like,
and they need the advice. Somebody like me, I don't know what colors go together.
Exactly.
And it's an art, literally.
So we've been less hurt by that, but I still think that this is a big problem. I know a lot of retailers in the downtown are struggling. You simply cannot inventory sufficiently to compete with online merchandising, and pricing is very difficult as well. So I do think that hopefully part of the solution will be increased density. We will have more people living and working in the downtown who will be able to come out at lunchtime or whatever, and hopefully will be interested in going to a retail business of one kind or another. But the world is changing, and it's changed very dramatically. And I think that the idea that a big box retailer is going to come in and save the day.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah,
I think
it really has sailed.
We have to give people experiences, it seems to me.
Exactly.
Things to do.
Yep. And this is critical. I mean, one of the problems is that we have very little activity in the downtown for people. Restaurants, certainly. We need to do more of the kinds of things like the tasting room that's going to be opening soon on Division Street.
About that,
very interesting young fellow who has a microbrewery in Mount Vernon who is going to be opening what we call a tasting room on Division Street, and selling farm-based products, New York State farm products, which is beer, wine, and cider.
As an artist, and we're going to get, I know our next guest is on hold, and we'll be with him momentarily in a couple of minutes. You run an art shop.
Yep.
You're an artist by trade, businessman, city councilman. We see there are these shops where people go in and drink wine and paint. It seems to me that there'd be an opportunity to do something like that in our downtown.
We do have. There is Lord and Andra, who is who has a place here on North Avenue now. They do that kind of thing. It's been done in a couple of the bars here locally, as a matter of fact.
But we need an artist to do it. We need you to do it.
It's not exactly my thing.
No, it's not.
Not exactly my thing. But I think this is, this is an entertainment. This is fun for people to do. They're looking to something to do with their girlfriends, go out at night and have a couple of glasses of wine and do a painting. I think it's a perfectly charming thing to do. Could you see me with
paint all over myself? Eva,
anything
you want to shout out about before we let you go?
I just want people to get out and vote. I mean, really, however you decide to vote, please just get out and vote. I'm always disappointed in the turnout for these off-year elections.
Yeah,
I think it's important. I really do.
We've been screaming at the top of our lungs and giving out the info and talking to the candidates. Ivar Heiden, it is always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you very much. District 4 here in New Rochelle, running unopposed. We go to our next guest. Let me say a little bit about him. Harlan Ullman, you know him as an author, you know him as a regular contributor to this program. He has had many distinctive positions, the Chief Civilian Advisor to the Atlantic Council. He is a columnist for UPI. He's world respected as a national security expert. Most of the major generals and foreign ministers and defense secretaries on our planet, he probably knows by their first names. Some of the books he's written recently, most recently, Anatomy of Failure, How America Loses the Wars It Starts, and A Handful of Bullets, about how we came out of World War I, set the stage for the world we live in today. Without further ado, please welcome Harlan Ullman. Good morning, Harlan. How are you?
Good, Bob.
Always a pleasure.
Good to be with you again.
You have to stop accomplishing things, or I'm going to use half the interviews to talk about that. I didn't even get into your military service also, and thank you for that service. All right, let's get to cases. The man who spoke yesterday, who was their man in the Ukraine, the guy wears the uniform, the guy has a Purple Heart. How can anyone in their right mind diminish this man, A? B, on the other hand, how much damage did he do yesterday? And what about our foreign policy in the Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we should not rush to justice. Mm-hmm. The way that Colonel Vindman has been treated has been absolutely despicable. Laura Ingraham should resign from Fox Television.
Don't even start with her. She's a disgrace.
That is out. But having said that, if the White House were smart, they would have said, we have a different view, and while we respect the colonel for his service, he's wrong. Period. They did not do that. They attacked him. They accused him of being disloyal because he was born in Ukraine. And so now what they have done subconsciously, and nobody's recognized this yet, they have exacerbated the split with the military that began 2 weeks ago with the withdrawal from Syria, which was, if not a permanent wound, a really painful wound on the military, who don't want to get involved in wars, but once they get in, they don't want to get out. And so they saw the Syrian withdrawal as a stain on their badge of honor, and now the military is going to rally on the side of this colonel, irrespective of whether what he said was correct or not. Now, I believe that what he said probably was correct, but it was said in secret session, so I would say let's withhold judgment until all this comes out in the open. We're dealing with, I don't even want to say political nitroglycerin, we're dealing with political thermonuclear weapons here, the impeachment and removal of a president. This is deadly serious. This could be a constitutional crisis that could wreck the country, and I'm not overstating this, Bob.
No,
but
you're not
everybody rushes to judgment. And while I have no reason to doubt what the colonel said, let's wait until there's open testimony. Let's treat this guy honorably and with some degree of respect, but let's just hold our fire until this plays out. That's the big problem with the American political system today. And I think if the Republicans continue to embark on this course, they're going to find that this is going to be very much explosively used against them, and it should. Let me make one other point. Before the run-up to the second Iraq War in 2003, there was an ambassador called Joe Wilson who was sent to Niger to determine whether or not the aluminum tubing could be used for nuclear weapons in Iraq. Wilson came back and said they could not, wrote a piece in the Washington Post, was enormously slandered by the Bush administration. His wife was a secret CIA agent, Valerie Plame, and she was outed in all this. It turned out that Wilson was right, but the reaction of the Bush administration was to confront anybody who had any kind of damning information. It was sinful on their part. We should not be repeating this now. But as soon as the testimony becomes available, then we can decide. I will say one further thing. There is a real problem with taking all this public. This will be a Roman circus at the Colosseum. People will be acting for their audiences. I will guarantee you the Republicans are likely to behave in a most despicable way as they did during the Benghazi hearings. And I think what we're going to see is a horrible display of American politics at its worst. And I'm not sure that the open hearings are going to be able to get to the bottom of this, which is critical. Now, the White House, if the White House was doing this honorably, will say, we have a difference of opinion. We don't believe that happened. What really happened, who knows? Who knows who ordered the doctoring of the transcript? Whether that was illegal, whether there was anything wrong, nobody simply knows. But unfortunately, as I have said repeatedly, Bob, what we are seeing of all the outcomes, what we are seeing are the worst possible outcomes, in which you have a soldier who has served honorably for 20 years being besmirched because of political reasons that are callow, cowardly, and entirely undeserved.
Wow. You know, you and I have been having these conversations for, about 4 years now, and this is a reflection I have, or an impression. You sound very concerned, more concerned than I have ever heard you. Why?
Because we are on the brink of a constitutional crisis. We don't have absolute proof one way or the other. There is no previous chart or history that we can follow. If what the president done was wrong, is that impeachable? Does that rise to the point of being removed from office? Now, you can say technically he did violate the law. Al Capone was got for income tax evasion when he was a murderer and a villain, because that's all they could get him for. And I think that the Capone analogy will be used. Are you going to throw a president out of office on what could be a technicality, even though he may be very, very deserving of leaving office? And you have, on the Republican side, a genuine fear of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie
Sanders, sure.
About how these people are going to wreck the country, and quite frankly, as a registered independent, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders scare me.
Me too.
And so I can sympathize with Republicans, and the Senate does not want to be in the minority. So if you're a Republican and you have a choice between convicting and throwing out Donald Trump, who you may dislike enormously and detest his performance as president, or face an Elizabeth Warren, how are you going to vote?
This is wow. You've given us a wealth of things to chew on. I want to toss the outlier out here. Laura Ingraham and her ilk, and they exist on the left too, but much more on the right. These people, it really is a question of this business that I am in and the disgrace that talk radio has become, which is where she grew up. Laura Ingraham was interested in keeping her listeners, or watchers in this case, her viewers, one, two, kowtowing to the hard right in this country. It's not an outlier in the sense that people listen to her, but good grief. Again, these are the people that have ruined my profession, unfortunately, which is why I'm on my own now. Now, next, there's an element here in listening to you. And it's kind of like, I imagine that if someone went in with a gun to professional wrestlers and said, hey, guess what? You got to fight for real. There's so much rhetoric, and I'm going to use the word for the first time in broadcasting, so much bullshit. and so much nonsense among our elective class that now that it's real, I don't think they know how to act, because it seems.
Well, that's the problem, Bob.
Because, in all fairness to the president and Republicans, the Republicans are facing one of the most sacred things that any Senate has ever faced, which is, and where I kind of agree with you, I don't know that the president's behavior rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, because clearly, and I wanted your reaction to this, the Constitution and the way it's been set up regarding impeachment, a high crime and misdemeanor is going to be whatever the Senate is willing to say it is. So they have something.
No, the House is. It's up to the House to impeach. They will have the charges, and the Senate will vote on it. They will be the jury.
Okay. No, but here's what I'm saying. The Congress gets to bring it, but the Senate gets to pass on it. And where I tend to agree with the Republicans in this one is I don't know that it rises to the level of.
Of course.
I don't think that it does, and I think that it should be left to the people to decide unless he does something so egregious. But I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you that I don't want to see a Warren or a what's his face.
Sanders.
Or Sanders, and I think that would be egregious. However, there's a bigger principle here. There are those that say that we can't impeach Trump because we get Pence. Well, we can't impeach Trump because we could get Warren or the other guy. I think we need to do what's best for the country, but that's not.
That's not what's going to happen.
No.
People will say it's going to be the best for. What you have here. Is perhaps on the part of the president a series of serial misdemeanors.
Yes.
You know, this is the guy who went out and got caught jaywalking 50 times, drunk driving 37 times, and parking in improper or illegal places. So the question is, now we've got all these tickets, do we take this guy to jail? Or did he actually commit a crime while he was jaywalking? And that's what the inquiry needs to uncover. But there is no Peter Rodino, and I absolutely guarantee you, Bob, and your listeners, that when this becomes public hearings, it will be the Goon Show. It will be Saturday Night Live from hell, simply because the Republicans and the Democrats are going to be grandstanding. You're going to hear a lot of babble from the members and probably not enough information from the witnesses. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm afraid history is very much on my side.
Well, I think that it is. Do you know what I'm still scarred by? And I know it goes back to 1991 or 2. I'm still scarred by the way, even though I think he's a terrible justice, the way they treated Clarence Thomas. It was all about posturing. I can't even imagine what this is going to be like.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you got the Kavanaugh hearings and the Thomas hearings. These will be, go back and listen to Benghazi, listen to Mike Pompeo, listen to Jim Jordan.
Oh, Jim Jordan's a maniac.
Listen to Trey Gowdy. They were unbelievable. And I think that's what you're going to see. And they will attack this colonel. They will attack everything. And the fact is, we need to get to the bottom of this information. You know, where is Peter Rodino when you need him? Fortunately, he's long since been dead.
You know what's interesting? I spoke to a political scientist today. You're here, other political operatives, and I think the gravity of the situation is beginning to become apparent. The game is becoming, as I suggested, real. And I think a lot of people agree that while this president, there certainly was quid pro quo, at least I will say that, I don't know that it rises to the level of an impeachable offense. I think everybody agrees that this has probably been done before and he got caught. And finally, people are sobering up. But yet, it seems in some ways that the Republicans are hurting that case themselves, you know, by being so belligerent towards these people.
Absolutely, and the Democrats would do the same thing.
Yes, they would. Absolutely.
Talk radio from the right, talk radio from the left is just as scandalous, and it's one of the problems. I mean, this is throwing gasoline on fires. This is yelling fire in crowded movie theaters, and it's igniting the public. And what it will do is to ignite the respective bases, the 30% or so that are Trump supporters to the very end, and whatever the number is of absolute Trump haters on the other side. And it may well be that we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of this. What we need is a clear-headed prosecutor who is going to establish the evidence with as much objectivity and reason as possible.
But
so we can
you know
make
what,
sound
though?
judgment.
But we've already criticized those people. I mean, number one, well, Mueller disappointed me, you know, and I'll go to my grave with this one. He had his moment in history, and he bailed. This guy now in charge of looking into the investigators, if you will, the gentleman from Connecticut. He's well respected, too. But yet, if he comes up with something that one side or the other doesn't like, they kill him. Where do we go from here? If we're not going to accept anyone as an independent arbiter, what's the point?
Well, we've made this point for a long time, Bob. You've got the two greatest democracies of the 20th century in irons. You've got Britain, which may not have yet gotten its pass to get out of Brexit. I mean, Johnson has been able to call an election for the 12th of December. I'm going to predict a hung parliament in which there's no majority. And so the extension that the European Union has given Britain before it leaves may have to be repeated, because I just don't think you're going to get sufficient numbers of people to back the conservative parties to give them a majority. We'll see, but that means a parliamentary system is not working, and in this country, a system of checks and balances is certainly not working. And it may well be that our system has just simply outlived its usefulness, and so we're going to become into rather like in Italy with an unbelievable number of governments, or interestingly, like France between 1919 and 1939, when they had 33 different premiers.
Well, yeah, and of course, one of the things that led to Hitler, I think there were 31 parties in Germany during the Weimar Republic. So
I'm not suggesting we're going to have 39 presidents. What I am suggesting is that it's going to be very difficult, with politics being so hugely divided, that we're going to be able to govern with any kind of civility, compromise, and be able to address the critical issues that the country is facing in terms of health care, in terms of the economy, in terms of over-exaggerating the dangers. I mean, in another area, why have we made Russia and China threats? Why are they now the enemy? Yeah, okay, I understand Putin went into Ukraine in 2014, but where has the United States not invaded? I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not being an apologist from Putin, but from the Russian side and from other sides, you guys went into Afghanistan. Okay, September 11th was the reason. You're still there. You didn't learn your lesson. You went into Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that didn't work. You went into Libya in 2011 and destroyed that country. Don't lecture us on do's and don'ts. And we don't have a particularly good answer to that question.
You know Harlan Ullman, and I want to remind people, Harlan Ullman is with us. You know his books, you know his columns in UPI, internationally renowned national security expert. You're absolutely right about this, and something that it's always interested me, believe it or not, in the beginning when the president, forget about the interference with the election, when the president was not belligerent towards Russia when he first came in, I thought that to be somewhat positive, because I think we demonized them at our expense. And it all went awry because of the election. But nonetheless, you said several years ago, you know, if we had people making the kinds of noises on our border that people make on the Russian border, we'd be just as worried about looking west as they were.
Well, indeed. In fact, we did invade Mexico once or twice, and similarly in Canada.
All right.
Of course, that was a long, long time ago.
I wanted to do one more thing about domestic politics, and then we'll take our satellites around the world. I'm going to give you two juxtaposed people. On one side, Jim Jordan, who just comes off like a pit bull without reason, and the other side, AOC, who has a one-track mind about the things that she wants to do. Let's start with Jordan. What is with this guy? I mean, whenever I see him on TV, he literally is revolting. Literally. What is his issue?
I'm not a psychiatrist, and it's against the law for me to speculate on his mental condition. About AOC, she won simply because her opposition, who had been, I don't know, a 15-term congressman, didn't take her candidacy seriously, and so out of a district of 350,000 people, she became the nominee with about 12,000 votes. Children should be seen and not heard. Next question, please.
Thank you very much. All right. Great getting Mr. Baghdadi. we hear naturally everybody's spinning it. The Democrats say, trying to minimize what was accomplished. The Republicans wanting to spike the ball. What is as you understand it in your travels around the planet, what is the truth vis-a-vis ISIS? And isn't it like shark's teeth? One leader gets taken over by another anyway.
Yeah, it's a huge setback. It's very positive. This guy got his just desserts. He was a villain. What was interesting was that, according to the news, and I don't have any inside information, Bob, that his house was not nearly as well defended as was bin Laden's in Abbottabad, which I find curious. And we'll never know. I doubt that he was crying like a child, as the Trump
that's
Donald Trump
silly.
said he was. But yes, it was a very, very positive step. This is going to be certainly a step back for the Islamic State. The fact that we also killed their key spokesperson the other day is positive too. But look, this is an ideology. This is something that has grown up and festered because of a variety of issues, from desperation to huge differences in inequality to unfairness. And so now you have a religious ideology in which death is preferable, in which the infidels are everybody else. And unfortunately, with a world population of 7 billion people, 0.1% is 70 million people who might be attracted to the ideology. So this is still a huge danger, a common danger to mankind and to society. It's been a step forward, but we would be not only naive or incompetent, we would be derelict if we let our thinking lead us to the conclusion that the Islamic State is no longer a threat. I would say that radical extremism, probably along with climate change, economic disparity, social issues, and the inability of governments to govern, are among the greatest dangers to mankind today.
Yeah, I think that ought to be your next book, The Inability of Governments to Govern, because for all that's gone wrong in the Middle East, every time a government's turned over, or as well it should be, to the people of the Middle East, they screw it up. And I don't understand the reasons for that, but a lot of it is historic. But having said that, the same analogy we used before, where here in the United States, the political classes of right and left, all of a sudden it's getting real for them because of this impeachment issue. Does not Saudi Arabia have that same problem? I mean, the Sunni madrasas that they've put out across the world to keep everybody away from them, isn't it coming back to haunt them and everybody else?
Well, not really, because thus far Saudi Arabia has been able to have sufficient internal control by the police. Fortunately, the religious police have been very much diminished. But the 5,000 princelings, or whatever the number is, obviously want to maintain their rulership. So for the time being, I think the issue in Saudi Arabia is reasonably stable, and that's one of the reasons why Mohammed bin Salman has been trying to modernize the country, his Saudi 2030 plan. But there are huge pressures. And now that women can drive, that they can go to sporting events by themselves, that they may not be forced to wear hijab, all these reflect huge social pressures. And unfortunately, the Saudi regime is very brittle. So at some stage, that brittleness could crack, and you could see a revolution. And so the dilemma for the Saudis has always been, will they be able to reform quickly enough to relieve those tensions, or by relieving those tensions, as Mikhail Gorbachev found out in the Soviet Union with perestroika and glasnost, are those just going to make the tensions much worse and end the regime? That's the dilemma that the Saudis face, and I do not have a good answer as to how it's going to come out. For the short term, the House of Saud obviously will stay in power, but what that short term is in terms of days, months, years, decades, I don't have a guess.
Speaking of the Saudis and some of the other countries in that region, including Iran, Iraq, and the oil therein, the president the other day said we got to protect the oil. And yet we tell people in America that we are self-sufficient in oil. But one of the things that we don't talk enough about is the reason why oil needs to flow in these other countries is that it's a worldwide commodity. And, just because we have our own oil doesn't mean the price won't go up. The oil companies may make more money, but it'll cost $100 to put gas in your car. What is the situation with oil in the Middle East, and where are interests most challenged?
Well, first of all, you would not like to get a telegram saying, "Dear Mr. Marrone, the Secretary of the Army regrets to inform you that your son Bob Jr. was killed in action defending Syrian oil wells." Mm-hmm. That's not what the U.S. military does. Now, if it's a cover for keeping some presence in the region and the military had no other option, I understand that. But the notion of protecting oil is nonsensical and strategically is just a specious argument. The fact of the matter is, and you're absolutely right, oil is fungible, and we may not need external support of energy for the moment, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the world does not need to have that. So the notion that we're energy independent is a non sequitur. And by the way, if you just do a little bit of thinking about the future, when the American population grows to 350 million and the world population grows to 8 billion, guess what? We will no longer be energy independent. We are going to be dependent upon exports. Some people think it may be as soon as 2040. So the notion of energy independence, which is in many ways a mirage, certainly will no longer perpetuate itself beyond the next 10, 20, or 30 years.
Wow. Now, Harlan Ullman, our guest. Let's take a look. I'm going to take you to a local place now. We're going to move our satellite to California. I don't know if you know who Doug McIntyre is, but he wrote a wonderful piece this week. He was if you're familiar with talk radio, he used to run a very honest show, center right actually, on something called Red Eye Radio. It was on all night in WABC and all their networks, and then now a morning host out there, but now a columnist. And he wrote about how out in California, the whole Green New Deal, quote unquote, idea is making stuff egregiously expensive. He has a 2,000 square foot house. His energy bill was $900. It took him $77 to put gas in his tank, and the forests are burning out there. What are the dangers of going too far left with these ideas, and where's the balance? And in terms of the kind of work that you do, how much is the climate and how much is the move towards green energy, as well intended as it is? How do these factors affect us in terms of our security?
Well, mishandled. I mean, as the Romans said, and Greeks said, that moderation is important. Too much of anything can kill you. Too much water, you drown, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these whole notions of a green new Green Deal are nonsensical because they are unaffordable. And the fact of the matter is, we talk about all the electric cars. Who is going to generate the energy for these electric cars? Is it going to come from heaven? Where's it going to come from? And solar is good, but solar is a very, very small percentage. Most of the world still relies on coal. And so unless there's some way of finding how you sequester CO2 from coal, that is going to continue to pollute the environment. The most efficient and cleanest energy, of course, is nuclear. But everybody's afraid they're going to be future Chernobyls. And if we were smart, instead of decommissioning our nuclear reactors, we'd buy a lot more. And so what we need right now is a sensible program that goes into clean energy. But California is absolutely the best example of what can go wrong. And California is the model if we take the advice of Bernie Sanders and AOC for this Green New Deal. Instead of having it confined to California, there are 49 other states that could become just like it one way or the other.
And that would be unsustainable. And thus, going back to the beginning of this interview, in fact, I got a text before somebody heard us railing about something the president did and was unhappy with our conversation, but missed the first part, how unacceptable it would be to have Bernie Sanders or Miss, oh God, towards the end of the show, my brain doesn't work anymore, but the other candidates.
Well, fortunately, there's a Congress, and what people don't understand, the only good news is that the plans that Sanders and Warren have would not be approved by Congress, even the Democratic Congress.
But because they're unacceptable. In fact, that is quite the challenge. But I wanted to go somewhere else. I know you have an early lease today. We've only got about 15 more minutes. Coming up at 9:29, you're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. This is Radio Westchester, and it's 58 right now, getting up to 62. Rain today, tomorrow, the rest of the week, etc. We don't ask you this question enough. And I had some people on earlier in the week who deal with national issues. An awful lot of people are worried about hacking and the grid and our electrical grid. And we probably don't ask you enough about that. And yet I know you are the chair of a company where you deal with these kinds of things. How at risk are we in terms of our electrical grids and our water supplies and other forms of terrorism involving technology?
It would rather be like a Katrina. It would be an interruption. The one area that we are most vulnerable in, and okay, somebody takes down the power grid for a day or two. This happens when a thunderstorm comes in and you lose your satellite television for a bit. But I don't want to underestimate. It would be a problem, but it's not existential.
Okay.
The one area where we are, and the same thing goes for water supplies. It would take a huge amount of any kind of a toxin to infect people. But the way that you would do it would be to say, we have lead in the water. And so now you've got a Flint, Michigan issue. So you would politicize this and exaggerate the dangers. Whether or not there was any kind of a contaminant in the water supply made no difference. People would respond. So the way that you would be disruptive was to do it politically and to scare people. Now, the one area we are vulnerable is in major transformers, because you can't go to Walmart and buy a transformer. In some cases, they take a year or two to build. Wow. So if I were a bad guy, I would be focusing on transformers, because that's the way that I could do the greatest amount of damage. But having said that, who would do that? If this was going to be sort of like a September 11th attack, you would have even a greater response by the United States possibly than we did then. In case of a war, look, the reason I don't like to declare China or Russia an enemy, there are many reasons. In the case of China with 1.5 billion people, we don't have enough bullets.
Yeah, they win.
And in the case of the Russians, we don't really want to fight a thermonuclear war. And so if a war came, it could be a fight to the finish, and we would be less worried about hacking than we would be surviving nuclear fallout. So societies are fragile, they're vulnerable, but the question is, when does that fragility become a vulnerability? And I think we need to be better prepared. The one area where we are not prepared, and is probably the most, I don't want to say the most likely, but the highest priority that could occur is a flu pandemic. The Great Flu of 1919, killed 40 million people. We've been able to contain Ebola pretty much in West Africa. It really hasn't spread beyond the continent. We've been able to deal with that, not necessarily totally effectively, but so far sufficiently, at least as far as we're concerned. But I would be most concerned right now about the dangers of a major pandemic that could occur. And while we can say we're always vulnerable to some kind of interaction, I think that the likelihood of that is quite small.
That's good. Are there people, as we talk today, are there people in labs and questionable societies trying to figure out the best way to do something like that?
Sure. You have to assume that there are people. You're going to have some 8-year-old kid who thinks it's going to be great fun if he can shut down the power grid as a laugh. This is as much a problem as the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. And some of these youngsters probably have the technical capacity to be able to do that.
Or as the president once famously said, some 400-pound guy lying in bed.
I would not use that analogy, but quite frankly, those are things that are happening. Everything has a dual-edged sword. Look at the way that Facebook has now become the weapon of choice. For the Islamic State, because that's the way you recruit people. But look, the technology has changed, but human nature has not. Think about the yellow journalist 120 years ago.
I do every day.
They were not on the internet, they were not on Facebook, but the Journal American helped preempt the war against Spain in 1898. And so you use the means that are available, and for good or for ill, and that is just a function of human nature.
9:34. We've got about 10 minutes left with our guest, Harlan Ullman, internationally renowned national security expert. We're going to move our satellites to a place we almost never talk about, a fresh page. So listen up, folks. There's been so much going on in the Middle East in the past several years. Of course, Russia and the hacking of our elections and the China trade wars and Iran and Israel. We never talk about South America. And we have you always talk about failing governments, rightly so. We have failing governments there, particularly in Colombia. We can't get things straight with Mexico. What is the inherent problem there, and what are America's risks or interests, both of those there in that continent?
Henry Kissinger once summed this up by saying, South America is a dagger pointed at the heart of Antarctica. We have always minimized South America because what happens in South America tends to stay in South America, absence, Castro and his brother and the communist movements. South America is the best. This is not the best. An example. South America is an advanced version of Africa in the sense that it has huge resources, it has educated populations, but it's been unable to govern itself, or at least any number of. Look at Venezuela.
It's like having a drunken uncle.
Chile.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so the problem here is that you've got the inability of governments to govern, and we have tended to neglect South America, Latin America, except in certain things, such, for example, as immigration, which has become obviously a touchstone, or in terms of the Cold War. But the fact of the matter is, we should be turning our attention there, but in the competition for bandwidth, we've got far greater problems, and so, by default, Latin America becomes a secondary or tertiary area.
Okay,
and that's the way it's been for a very long time.
One more while we look south, and I've done a lot of radio about this subject, at least, spun opinions and done some stuff. The refugee, no, not refugees anymore, but the diaspora, the people in southern Florida who are very organized, very politically powerful, it seems to me have frightened presidents, Congress, and are key to elections every year. They famously didn't even want to send a kid back with his dad. Ever since the Bay of Pigs, let me come to the essence of it. I don't trust them. I don't trust their intentions. I don't trust their judgment. I don't trust them with respect to what happened with Jack Kennedy. There's just something troubling about that powerful group trying to reverse history. And that is very pedestrian, very layman. What is the issue with the Cuban exiles in South Florida?
The answer is really simple. 29. That's the number of electoral votes that Florida has.
Yes.
And everybody needs 29. And so the Cuban Americans have dominated politics in the southern part. They are essential to establishing political victory in an election. But the same thing could be true about the Irish in Boston. I mean, think about how many politicians have favored the IRA from that part of the world because of the Irish contingency. And so you always have ethnic groups, or how many Jews have tipped the scales in favor of Israel. Mm-hmm. You take a look at New York, and you take a look. I mean, this is the nature of politics. It's not a republic.
I know.
And so people represent what they feel are important issues, and the Cuban Americans, who have a right to believe that their issue is important, become critical in the vote. And so this is quite natural, whether you accept or disagree with their propositions. but it's true with almost any ethnic
No,
group.
I understand that, and it makes total sense. However, would I be incorrect in saying that because of those 29 electoral votes, we've had our policies towards Cuba have been toxic?
Of course.
It just seems
Of course.
it seems to an idiot like me that having relations with a country that close, who can hear our radio, that can see our television, that could, for good or ill, experience our culture, that they would evolve to a more free place almost by default.
Well, what happens is you have any political constituency. Take the NRA.
Yep.
You know, the NRA are not wedded to Cuba, but they are wedded to the Second Amendment. And think about how much power they have, or how much power unions have had, or how much power banks have had through campaign financing. And so you have constituency politics on which politicians are dependent for many things, particularly money. And of course, their views and their biases may not conform to, quote, the American interest, but in terms of domestic policies, this is called a democracy, unfortunately.
Well, it is part of democracy, but because it's always troubled me. Apropos of that, I want to get just a little bit of history done before we send you on your way to your next meeting, Harlan Ullman, and we always appreciate your time. And as someone who does what you've done and have access to what information you do have access, have you ever taken a position on Kennedy and whether or not he Oswald, and when I say acted alone, I don't think there was anybody else on the grassy knoll, but do you really think he was just some lone individual decided to get...
I think the Warren report was I have taken a strong position. 20 marksmen were given the Manley Carbonero rifle that Oswald used. If you were 5 feet away from me and I had that rifle and had 5 shots at you, I might be able to hit you once. Mm-hmm. The thing was notoriously inaccurate, and none of the 20 marksmen, or whatever the number was, were able to hit the car when they recreated the scenes with the same wind conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My speculation, and this is just wild speculation,
of course,
that Kennedy was accidentally killed by a Secret Serviceman who had an M16, turned quickly, and the gun went off.
Really?
That's a reason why the bullet was never found, and I think it was entirely accidental. I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald did it. I'm not sure there was a larger conspiracy. But if I had to make a guess, and, I put about $1 on this in terms of confidence because it's a way-out speculative idea, I think that just somebody panicked, and for a variety of reasons, nobody was going to admit that this was an accident.
I've never heard this theory before. One of the things that has always resonated with me, having lived long enough to hear him say it, I believed Oswald when he said that he was a patsy. I do believe he was there, but and just even some of all the other dots that are there, and also
I agree. I mean, the biggest
my sports guy saying Jack Ruby.
If you take a look at people who had an intimate connection, they were either the witnesses, they were like Jack Ruby, they were police. There were 150, and the 150 were all dead within a year. Most of them not from natural causes. The actuarial chance of that happening was 0.
I've read that. And then there's the issue of Dorothy Kilgallen, who the next day was supposed to have an interview with someone and died rather mysteriously as well. You probably know about that. Hey, listen, I know I have to let you go. We have to spend more time on this one of these days, and we have a guy on our staff who follows that very closely. We'll have to wire him in as well. Harlan Ullman, thank you very much. We need another book from you. Take care. We need another book from you. Thank you very much. And no, come back. No, don't go, because you wanted to weigh in on this, and he had to go, or I would have patched you into the phone. Jake, you've been following this. That was music to your ears. You ran over to grab the headphones. Now, again, knowing who Harlan Ullman is and the access to information.
That's your serious guy?
He's a very serious guy.
Oh, jeez.
And
I don't know. I thought he was, but geez, I've never heard anything like that before.
It's kind of interesting. Now, I'm going to tell you how serious he is. He's the chief, has been for many years. He just moved on from that now to chair another corporation. Civilian advisor to the Atlantic Council. This guy has the ear of prime ministers, foreign ministers, businesses. He was a destroyer commander, a swift boat commander. He teaches at the War College. This is no slouch. He also he teaches down at Guantanamo. No slouch. That one shocked me too. That one just totally blew me away. Very interesting. But the statistic he touted is a true statistic. All those people
About
that
all
died.
the people that died,
Yeah.
So I don't understand how he made that claim and then made that statement.
I think that what he was saying is that you can tie them together. What interested you in this?
I just think it's such a massive cover-up.
Just stay on the mic. By whom?
I think obviously intelligence was involved. I think the mafia was involved. I think a lot of the team of the Bay of Pigs was the team that put that together. I think the hybrid was all involved.
Well, when you mentioned the Bay of Pigs, that's why I'm so distrustful of the Cuban exiles.
The Bay of Pigs, it was the brainchild of the mafia and the intelligence. They were...
Well, there was something going down. Even when I was at Merrill, I was in charge for a while of a special unit where we had unclaimed funds and different investments that we were not allowed to write off. In other words, when something gets old enough, you write it off. And it turned out that we had a storefront down in Miami. And we had a whole bunch of money there that we stopped spending right around when Kennedy was killed. And I was told, don't go there, don't touch it, don't look at it. I mean, we finally talked about it, finally wrote it off maybe in the 80s, the late 80s. And I'm not saying it had anything to do with anything. Other than that, it was always mysterious what was going on in Miami. You had Cuban exiles.
All the anti-Castro Cubans, right?
You had Cuban exiles involved in Watergate. You had Cuban exiles involved on the periphery of that assassination. Something just doesn't seem right.
To me, the Jack Ruby, that's your answer right there.
Well, yes, it's a
Jack Ruby
for
just
part of it.
That much of a patriot that he had to avenge JFK?
Now, you said the same thing that he did about the rifle, yet I've seen some, and we didn't have enough time because he had to go. I've seen some of the, what's the word I want to use? The documentaries about that. And there are people who could get off.
Yeah,
shots.
I mean, that's fine.
With that
Could
gun.
you give him an M16 and I still wouldn't believe that it was just Oswald. I think the mafia and the intelligence created Oswald. They built up a profile for him. They built up his background.
Now, well, where there is a gap, and I think that's where he may have been speaking to, is there is no doubt that when you look at the Zapruder film, everyone says, including the Warren Commission, that Governor Connolly was struck by the bullet that went through the president's neck. Yet he didn't respond for 3 frames.
Yeah,
3 or 4 frames. I never bought that.
I think the Zapruder film is completely doctored as well.
Oh, I don't know about that, but it may well be. I know there were other shots fired, and they never found the bullets. So, but that's interesting. Now, when you're a little bit younger, what first drew you to this? What drew you to the assassination?
Probably that terrible Oliver Stone movie. I was young when that came out, and it was just such the rage, and I enjoyed it. But I think it's been proven to be just
Well, not
fiction.
totally. It wasn't fiction. I mean,
I think a lot of it is hyperbole.
Hyperbolic, yes.
Hyperbolic.
Yes, but it wasn't fiction. It's a question of the events were true. The conclusion is where I took umbrage with it. But I think what he was trying to do with that Oliver Stone was just raise the question, and clearly it did for you. Was to raise the question. I'm going to go to my grave thinking that other people were involved. I don't subscribe to Harlan's theory, but you know what? That's something worth looking into. I got a bookshelf.
And to go back to that rifle, why did Oswald order the rifle from a gun shop in Chicago when he was in Texas? It's as easy to get a gun in Texas as it is to get a pack of gum.
Was it that way in the 60s as well, the way it is today?
A lot easier.
Gun country. All right. Thank you very much. Before we go, people want to know your predictions for this evening.
Nationals, I think it's going to be easy too.
Nationals? Okay.
I think it's going to be
like a 5-1 game?
7-2, something like that.
So everyone goes home. That they're going to whap.
Greinke's going to get knocked around early.
They're going to use a can of whip butt on him?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And all 7 games will be won by the road team.
All 7. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at
Prove me
what's
wrong,
coming up
Astros.
tomorrow.
Prove me wrong.
And tomorrow we'll start picking his brains, folks, for his picks. Have you got any picks yet set for
Yeah, I've
us?
got one lock.
What do you got? What's the lock? Give us the lock today. Let him check his records before we go. We want to check the lock, and then we'll go over who's coming on tomorrow. Oh, Andy Spano's on tomorrow. Brendan Conroy's coming in to see us tomorrow as well. So, and we'll get Al Tarantino back on the schedule. We kind of messed it up for him today. And we're reaching out to Sandra Kay as well. So, that is who is coming up tomorrow. What do you got for me? What do you got for me?
All right, I'll go more into it on Friday, but Sunday night, Patriots on the road, giving 3.5 to the Ravens. That's gonna be an easy one.
Giving 3? They give, give me Brady. Give me, put the house. Go, I'll get the
No, the
mortgage.
Patriots are favored by 3.5.
Yeah. You got it.
Is that
3.5. Who came up with that line?
Is that your lock of the week?
That's my double lock. Take it home. Bet the house. Bet the ranch. Put your kids up for ransom. 3.5 points.
Ravens have a young quarterback, and Belichick just destroys those young quarterbacks.
This young quarterback is going to make the Christians and the Lions look like a birthday party. Oh, my God. What's his last name? Pinata?
Lamar Pinata.
Wait till the Tom and Bill show get a hold of them. I watched Brady the other day. Before you go, I didn't like that he was a cheat. Not so much that he was a cheat. Everybody cheats a little bit in sports. But when he destroyed his cell phone, a measure of respect went away because he clearly destroyed evidence. But be that as it may, he's the damn greatest football player I ever saw.
Did you hear that the Patriots traded for a decent wide receiver, not a superstar, a decent wide receiver, and he wore number 12?
Uh-huh.
Good player, not a great player. Brady texted him, welcome to the team. Do you want number 12? I'll give you my number. So Brady offered.
Get out of here. That is a team guy. But I watched him make some of those plays the other night, and I'm saying, nothing better than football highlights. I love my hockey, favorite, but football highlights are the best because you can see the whole week in 1 hour.
That's true.
And some of the passes that he makes,
And he's 42.
I know he's 42. We aging athletes have a lot to say. All right. Jake Schaefer, we'll talk with him again tomorrow. We'll get his feedback. In fact, we're going to pencil you in with a time. We need your feedback on the World Series. We have a lot coming up tomorrow again. Andy Spano, we'll talk about impeachment with him. Brendan Conroy, we'll talk about local politics. We also will see if we can get an update on the Bob Cox story regarding the person that has been charged with having sex with a young girl here in the school system in New Rochelle. Also get an update on the issues surrounding the city planning commissioner, Al Tarantino. We'll get him back tomorrow and more. In fact, we need to catch up with Vince, too, about how his conversion to God is going. He says he found God in a trunk or something like that. If you have any comments you'd like to make before we go, we got a couple of other issues here. You can give us a buzz at 222-3141, 222-3141. But for now, I want to thank a number of people and our sponsors. Sarah Langlois distinguished herself well today. She's running on District 5 here in New Rochelle, running against Sandra Kay. Jeannie Zano, thank you very much. Mondaire Jones, young man running for the Senate seat, not the Senate seat, excuse me, for District 17 in the United States Congress, and grew up right across the river in East Ramapo, in that area. He is an African-American and gay, and if elected will be, as he said, these are his words, the first gay African-American elected to Congress. Very bright guy, went to Harvard, is a lawyer, and the person whose candidacy, when he challenged Nita Lowey, she decided it was time to retire. We'll never know if she had made that decision before his challenge. He has a number of people that he'll have to deal with in the primary that comes up in June. He will be no doubt facing off against Mr. Carlucci, and already he threw a couple of grenades at Carlucci's involvement in the state political issue of the IDC, the Independent Caucus, where he caucused with Republicans. Tom Abenante has said he wants to run. We'll get him on right after the election as well. And some people have thrown Amy Paulin's hat in the ring. She is the assemblywoman from Scarsdale. Ivar Hayden came in, and of course, Harlan Ullman, and a special shout out to Denise Ward for calling in and weighing in on the issues surrounding the Development Commissioner. Today's program has been supported by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com, and you'll note in what we talked about this morning, it was rated one of the better homes of its type in the country, in the state rather. Aging Issues Management also supported us today, and their subsidiary Aging Issues Radio. The law firm of Payne & Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. A lot going on the planet, and regarding impeachment, we do a lot of talking about that. We are headed towards a very sacred place, and we hope that our elected officials take it as seriously as we think you do. Which is to say that if it's not impeachable, then let the people decide come Election Day. And that's going to fall on the Congress to bring charges, if indeed they do, and then the Senate to convict. And it is an open space, a blank sheet of paper. There is no precedent. It is our elected officials. It is they who will make that decision. I'm Bob Marrone for Jake Schaefer. We'll catch up with you tomorrow. This is Radio Westchester.